To save my family from ruin, I became the reluctant bride of the cold-hearted mafia boss. Forever. She had 72 hours to save her family. The offer on the table wasn't a lifeline. It was a leash. Sign the contract and become the permanent wife of the most feared criminal in America, or watch everything her father built get swallowed by debt and federal seizure. Serena Vale had never believed a person could be auctioned. Then she saw her name on the marriage agreement next to Dante Sorrento's, and she understood. She already had been. If you've ever been forced to choose between your freedom and the people you love, stay until the very end. Hit like and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The federal agents arrived at 6:14 in the morning. Serena knew the exact time because she had been awake since 4, sitting at the kitchen table with her mother's unpaid hospital bills spread across the surface like a losing hand of cards. She had been doing the math again, the way she always did when she couldn't sleep, running the same numbers through her head as if repetition might change the outcome. It never did. The numbers were always the same. The deficit was always the same. The hole her father had left behind when his heart stopped 3 months ago was always the same bottomless, airless thing. She heard the vehicles before she saw the lights. 3 black SUVs and 2 unmarked sedans pulling into the curved driveway of the Vale estate, which wasn't really an estate anymore, just a large, drafty house in a neighborhood that had once matched its ambitions. She went to the window. A man in a dark jacket was already walking toward the front door with a manila envelope under his arm, and the kind of expression that meant he had done this before and felt nothing about it. Her mother, Elaine, appeared in the hallway behind her in a bathrobe, her hair pressed flat on one side from sleep. She looked at the cars. She looked at Serena. She didn't ask anything. That was almost worse. Serena opened the door before they knocked. The man with the envelope identified himself as Special Agent Marcus Holt, Financial Crimes Division. He handed her the papers without ceremony. Asset seizure order, federal lien on the property. All accounts associated with Vale Shipping International frozen pending investigation into fraudulent debt restructuring and misappropriation of creditor funds. We'll need everyone out of the primary residence within 48 hours, he said. My mother has a medical condition, Serena said. Her voice was flat. She had learned somewhere in the last 3 months how to make her voice do that, go flat and hard like a stone skipped across cold water. There are provisions in the order for temporary housing assistance, Holt said. He didn't sound like he believed that was a real comfort. A caseworker will be in touch. He left. The cars stayed. 2 agents walked around the side of the house with clipboards, cataloging. Serena stood in the doorway holding the papers until her brother Marcus appeared at the top of the stairs. He was 19, still carrying the soft face of someone who hadn't finished becoming a man yet. And when he saw the federal vehicles in the driveway, he sat down on the top step like his legs had simply stopped working. How bad? He asked. Bad, she said. She didn't tell him the rest, that his college tuition account had been frozen along with everything else, that the 2 semesters he had left before his engineering degree were now in jeopardy, that the money their father had supposedly set aside in a protected trust had turned out to be leveraged against loans no one in the family had known existed. She didn't tell him because she needed him to keep functioning, and the full weight of it would have flattened him where he sat. Instead, she put the papers on the kitchen table on top of the hospital bills, went upstairs, showered, dressed in the most competent-looking clothes she owned, dark slacks, a gray blouse, the kind of outfit that said, I am in control even when nothing is, and drove to the offices of their family attorney, Gerald Marsh, who had handled Vale Shipping's legal affairs for 11 years. Gerald Marsh told her there was nothing to be done. He said it gently, in the way of someone delivering a verdict they had already prepared for, sitting behind a desk that was nicer than anything left in the Vale house. He said the federal case was airtight. He said the debts were real, even if the way they had been accumulated was suspicious. He said the word suspicious like he had chosen it very carefully, and Serena understood that he was not going to go further than that word. My father was not a fraudster, she said. I know you believe that, Gerald said. Do you? He looked at his hands. That was her answer. She left his office and sat in her car for 6 minutes, not crying, just breathing, slow and deliberate, the way she had learned to breathe when the world got too loud inside her chest. Then she drove home through mid-morning traffic with the radio off and the windows cracked, and the particular, specific feeling of someone who has run out of sanctioned options. The envelope was on the front step when she got back. Not from the government. No federal seal. Just a cream-colored envelope, thick paper, her full name written across the front in ink so dark it looked almost black. No return address. She almost didn't open it. Then she did. Inside was a single card, heavy stock, embossed with a stylized S. The message was short, 4 sentences. Your family's debts will be cleared in full within 24 hours of your agreement. All federal charges against the Vale estate will be resolved. Your brother's education will be secured. In exchange, you will become my wife, legally, permanently, and without reservation. At the bottom, Dante Sorrento. You have until midnight tonight. Serena read it 3 times. Then she turned it over, as if there might be something on the back that made it make more sense. There wasn't. She knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name in the way you know a storm system. Not because you'd seen it up close, but because you'd seen what it left behind. Dante Sorrento was the head of the Sorrento Syndicate, which was the polite term for an organization that controlled significant portions of the city's port operations, logistics infrastructure, and several dozen other enterprises that existed in the gray space between legitimate business and something the federal government would very much like to prosecute if they could ever build a case that stuck. He was 36, reportedly. Educated in Europe, reportedly. Capable of making a man disappear with a single phone call, reportedly. No one had a photograph of him that he hadn't allowed to be taken. She called the number at the bottom of the card, which she hadn't noticed until the 3rd reading. It rang once. Miss Vale? The voice was low and unhurried, with the faint remnant of an accent she couldn't immediately place. I expected you to call sooner. I'm calling now, she said. Who gave you the right to put a marriage proposal in an envelope on my front step like it's a pizza coupon? A pause. Not an offended pause. More like a recalibrating one. You're angry. I'm something, she said. I'd like to know what this is before I decide what. It's an offer, Dante Sorrento said. Not a trick, not a threat. A straightforward transaction. Marriage is not a transaction. In my experience, almost everything is. She wanted to hang up. She didn't. Why? Why my family? Why me specifically? Because your father's debts ended up in a place that concerns me, he said. And because you are the only member of your family capable of holding an agreement to its terms. I've done my research, Miss Vale. You researched me. Thoroughly. The word landed with a weight she didn't like. I want to meet in person before I give you any answer at all. Another pause. Shorter. Tonight, 8 o'clock. I'll send an address. The call ended. She stood in the hallway of her father's house with a phone in her hand and the particular feeling of a door closing behind her, even though she was standing still. The address arrived at 7:15, a restaurant in the financial district that she recognized as the kind of place where the reservation list had a 2-month wait and the menu didn't include prices. A car arrived at 7:40. Black, unmarked. The driver opened the rear door without speaking and didn't look at her once during the 20-minute drive, which she spent watching the city through tinted glass and running every argument she could construct for why she should turn this car around. She couldn't construct enough of them. Dante Sorrento was already seated when she arrived. Private room, back corner table, no other diners. 2 men in dark suits stood near the entrance and didn't look at her with the attention of men who see everyone. The room smelled of cedar and leather and something she couldn't name. She had expected someone larger, somehow. He was tall when he stood. She clocked that immediately, but lean in the way of someone who had burned through any excess a long time ago. Dark hair, close cut. Eyes that were a very specific shade of brown that she would later think of as the color of something just before it caught fire. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie, which seemed like a deliberate decision. He had a scar along his left jawline, faint but visible, the kind that doesn't come from an accident. He extended his hand. Miss Vale. She shook it because not shaking it would have cost her something she wasn't willing to spend yet. Mr. Sorrento. Sit, please. She sat. He sat. A server appeared and poured water and vanished. No menus came. You didn't eat, he said. You should. It will be a long conversation. I decide when I'm hungry, she said. Something crossed his face that might have been the beginning of a smile. It didn't finish arriving. Fair enough? She folded her hands on the table and looked at him directly, the way she had learned to look at men who expected her to be uncomfortable. Explain it to me. All of it. Why my family's debt? Why you? Why marriage specifically, and not something else? He was quiet for a moment. Not evasive quiet, just the quiet of someone who decides how much to give before they give it. Your father's shipping company owed significant sums to 3 separate creditors. 2 of those creditors are controlled indirectly by individuals in a network that operates in competition with my organization. The federal case against your father's estate has been constructed in a way that is not accidental. Someone used your family's financial distress as a mechanism for something larger. Someone engineered my father's collapse, she said. That is my belief, yes. Why would anyone do that? To create leverage. Over assets, over territory, over me, potentially. He said the last part without ego, just flat statement. Your father's shipping routes intersected with infrastructure that is very valuable to a number of parties. My father was not in organized crime, she said. No, Dante said. He wasn't. That's actually part of what makes this complicated. She absorbed that. And the marriage is the most efficient way to create a legal and structural relationship that protects your family's remaining assets under my organization's umbrella. The federal charges against the estate can be resolved. The debts can be cleared. But that protection only holds if there is a direct, permanent, legally binding connection. You need a wife. I need a specific kind of structural relationship that cannot be easily severed or contested. Marriage provides that. Other arrangements don't. He held her gaze without flinching. I am not under any illusion that this is appealing to you. Are you under any illusion that I'm going to agree to this? She asked. Yes, he said simply, because you've been running numbers in your head since you opened my letter, and you know that your other options are exhausted. Because your brother is 19 and his future is sitting on a federal hold. Because your mother's medical bills will not wait for a court process that could take 3 years. He paused. And because you are not the kind of person who lets the people she loves suffer when there is an option available, no matter how objectionable she finds it. It was the accuracy of it that stung, not the arrogance, the accuracy. What does it mean? She asked. Practically, day to day. What does being your wife mean? You live in my residence. You appear with me publicly when required. You do not speak about our arrangement to anyone outside of what I tell you is permissible. You are not a prisoner. You will have your own space, your own accounts, your own freedom within the parameters of security. He paused. There is no romantic component to this unless you choose otherwise. I won't. Then there won't be. She looked at him for a long time. He looked back. The men by the door were very still. Somewhere in the building, something was playing low music that she couldn't quite identify. I want the terms in writing, she said. A real contract. An attorney of my own choosing reviews it. My family receives confirmation that the federal charges are resolved before I sign anything. That's reasonable, Dante said. My mother stays in the house. The house stays in the family. Also reasonable. My brother finishes his degree. Full funding. Untouched. Done. And if you're lying to me, she said, or if this is something other than what you're telling me, if my family is hurt in any way because of this arrangement, I will not be quiet about it. Whatever you think you know about leverage, I am telling you right now that I will burn every piece of information I can find to the ground before I let you use my family against me. He was quiet. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Attention sharpening, recalibrating again, the way it had on the phone. I know, he said. That is also part of why I chose you. She signed the preliminary agreement at 11:53 that night, 7 minutes before his deadline, which she suspected he noted. She moved into Dante Sorrento's mansion 3 days later. The house was not what she expected. which she would come to understand was a theme with him. She had imagined something ostentatious, marble everywhere, gold fixtures, the visual language of men who want everyone to know what they have. Instead, the mansion sat back from the road on 12 acres of mature growth trees, and it was large but restrained, the kind of architecture that suggested old money rather than new violence. Dark wood floors, high ceilings, books on actual shelves that looked actually read. A kitchen that smelled of fresh coffee at 7 in the morning because someone had been in it before she woke up. She had her own wing, her own bathroom, her own entrance to the east garden, which was overgrown in a way that suggested it had been important to someone once and then abandoned. A woman named Rosa managed the household staff and showed Serena around with professional courtesy and zero curiosity, which Serena appreciated. The security team was visible at the perimeters and invisible inside, which she appreciated even more. She didn't like being watched. Dante was not there when she arrived. He didn't reappear until dinner, which was served at a long table in a room that could have seated 20 but held only 2 place settings, positioned at one end so they were across from each other rather than at opposite ends of the room. A choice she noticed and filed away without commenting on. "Settled?" he asked. "Adequately," she said. He passed her the bread. She took it. They ate mostly in silence, which was not uncomfortable in the way she had anticipated. He didn't seem to need to fill space. She didn't either. "I'll need to know your schedule," he said. "When I need you to appear somewhere, I'll give you 48 hours notice minimum. Events? Dinners? Functions?" "What kind of functions?" "Business." He said it without elaboration. "Your business." "Our business now," he said. "At least publicly." She put her fork down. "I need to be clear about something. I will stand next to you at whatever functions you require. I will play whatever role this marriage is meant to play in the structural arrangement you described. But I'm not going to perform emotions I don't have. I'm not going to look adoring. I'm not going to act like a woman who chose this." "I'm not asking you to," he said. "Some men would." "I'm not most men." She picked up her fork. "I've noticed." That was the first week. The second week, she started asking questions. Not about the organization, she was careful about that at first, understanding intuitively that there were lines, even in this arrangement, that would take time to earn the right to cross. She asked about the house, about the garden, about the books on the shelves in the East Library, which she had started using in the mornings because it had better light than her own sitting room. She found notes in the margins of several of them, terse annotations in small, precise handwriting, corrections to arguments, disagreements with the authors, question marks next to passages that others might have let slide. She started leaving her own notes, not addressed to him, just in the margins, her own corrections, her own disagreements. She didn't mention it. Neither did he. But she noticed, after the first week of this, that the books she had been reading started appearing on the end table in the East Library rather than back on the shelves, as if someone was tracking her progress. The first public appearance came in the third week, a charity dinner hosted by one of the city's old money families, the kind of event where the price of a table could have funded 2 years of Marcus's tuition. She wore a dark red dress that Rosa had, without any input from Serena, laid across the bed that afternoon. It fit perfectly, which was unsettling. Dante met her at the bottom of the main staircase. He looked at her for exactly 2 seconds, not an appraisal, more like a measurement, and said, "Ready?" "No," she said. "Good," he said, and offered his arm. "Honesty will serve you better than readiness tonight." She took his arm because the alternative was standing on the stairs alone. "Who are these people?" "Business associates, rivals, a few enemies who think they're friends." He steered her toward the waiting car with the practiced ease of someone who had been navigating rooms like this since before she was a threat. "Smile when I introduce you. Answer direct questions. Deflect anything about the shipping case. If anyone makes you uncomfortable, touch my arm and I'll extract us." "I can extract myself." "I know," he said, "but let me do it. It will say more." She didn't like that he was right. The dinner was an exercise in surveillance, which she hadn't anticipated. She had expected to feel watched. She was the new wife of Dante Sorrento, which meant every person in the room had an opinion about her. What she hadn't expected was to watch back, and to be good at it. She noticed the man who spent too long looking at Dante's left flank, She noticed the woman in green who angled her chair to keep Serena in sightline during the entire first course. She noticed the older man 3 tables over, who didn't look at Dante once, which was its own kind of tell. Between the first and second course, she leaned close to Dante's ear and said, "The man in the gray suit at the bar, 3 o'clock. He's been tracking your movements since we walked in." Dante didn't look. "I know," he said. "He works for someone I'm about to have a disagreement with." "What made you notice him?" "He's the only person in the room who hasn't looked at me once," she said. "Everyone looks at the new wife. When someone doesn't, they're managing their attention carefully." This time, something did arrive on his face. Real, actual surprise, quickly contained. "That's an astute observation," he said. "I've been in rooms full of men who underestimate women my whole life," she said. "You learn to see what they're trying not to show." He was quiet for a moment. "I don't underestimate you." "Jury's still out," she said, and picked up her wine glass. She didn't sleep well that night. The house was quiet in a specific way that large, well-sealed houses were. Not silent exactly, but closed off from the world in a way that pressed against her. She lay in her room and listened to nothing and thought about the man in the gray suit and the woman in green and the fact that Dante Sorrento had been watching every exit in the room while appearing to watch nothing. She thought about her father's shipping routes. She thought about the word engineered. She got up at 3 a.m. and went to the East Library and pulled a book at random from the shelf and sat in the chair by the window that looked out over the dark garden. She wasn't reading, she was thinking. The morning she found the files, it wasn't because she had been searching for them. She had been looking for a specific financial reference, the name of one of the creditor companies her father had owed, because something Gerald Marsh had said in the meeting kept nagging at her. The careful way he had chosen the word suspicious and then retreated from it immediately. She had been cross-referencing public records and corporate filings in the way she knew how, methodically, the way her father had taught her to read a balance sheet when she was 16. He had said, "Every number wants to tell you something. Your job is to figure out what question it's answering." The name she found, buried in a subsidiary listing that connected 2 of the creditor companies, was not a company name. It was a person. And the person was someone whose name she had heard in this house, in passing, once, in a conversation between Dante and a man she hadn't been introduced to, spoken with the particular flatness that people use for names they trust without thinking. Lucien Graves, Dante's second in command. She stared at the name on her screen for a long time. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway outside the library, and she closed the laptop, and she sat very still, and she thought, "Be careful. Be very, very careful about what you do with this." The footsteps stopped at the library door, Dante's voice through the wood. "Serena." She opened the door. He was already dressed, which meant it was later than she'd realized. His expression was the controlled, flat thing it usually was, but there was something underneath it, an edge of something she hadn't seen before. He looked past her into the room, at the closed laptop on the desk, then back at her. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" she said, and kept her voice absolutely level. "About what happened last night after the dinner," he said. "There's something you need to know about the man in the gray suit." He paused, and she watched him weigh whatever was coming. "He was found dead this morning," Dante said, "and someone left a message with the body. It was addressed to you." The message had been written on the back of a cocktail napkin from the dinner they had attended the previous evening, which meant whoever left it had been in that room, standing close enough to pocket something from one of their tables, and neither of them had seen it happen. Dante held it out to her in a clear evidence sleeve. He had already handled the logistics of that, which told her his people had reached the scene before the police and would continue to manage what information moved in which direction. She took the sleeve and read what was inside without touching it. 4 words, in the same heavy black ink as the card that had arrived on her doorstep weeks ago. "She knows too much." Serena read it twice. The library was very quiet. Outside the window, the garden was gray with early morning fog, and somewhere in the tree line a bird was doing something repetitive and tuneless. She handed the sleeve back to Dante. "He was a message," she said. "Not a casualty." Yes. Someone killed him to send me a warning. Or to send me one, Dante said, using you as the vector. She absorbed that. You think someone knows I've been looking into the creditor files? He didn't answer that immediately, which was its own answer. He crossed the room to the window and stood with his hands in his pockets looking out at the same gray garden, and she watched the set of his shoulders and the way he held his jaw and understood that he was not calm. He was performing calm, which was a different thing entirely. What do you know about Lucy and Graves? She asked. He turned. It wasn't a fast movement. It was the slow, deliberate turn of someone who has just been handed a piece of information they weren't expecting from a direction they weren't watching. His eyes found her face and stayed there, reading it the same way she read balance sheets, looking for the number that answered the question he hadn't asked yet. What did you find? He said. A name, in a subsidiary listing connecting two of my father's creditor companies. She kept her voice level. His name, buried under 3 layers of shell incorporation, but there. The room was very still. Show me, Dante said. She opened the laptop. She pulled up the filing. She turned the screen toward him and watched him look at it. And she watched what happened to his face while he did, which was almost nothing. A slight tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible stillness in the rest of his expression that was worse than any visible reaction would have been. He straightened up. He didn't say anything for a long moment. How long have you known? She asked. I've had a suspicion, he said. For about 3 weeks. I didn't have documentation. You have it now. Yes. Were you going to tell me? He looked at her. I was trying to confirm it without putting you in the position of knowing something that would make you a target. Someone sent a dead man with a message addressed to me, she said. I'm already a target. He didn't argue that. She respected him slightly more for it. Lucien has been with me for 9 years, Dante said, and the way he said it was not sentimental. It was the voice of someone cataloging a loss before they finished confirming it. Flat, precise. The voice you used when the feeling was too large to take out in a room this size. 9 years, she said, and you didn't see it. I saw pieces of it, he said, not the shape. What's the shape? He was quiet again. Outside, the bird had stopped its tuneless repetition. The fog was starting to lift off the garden in thin patches. Lucien has been operating a parallel network, Dante said finally, using the syndicate's infrastructure but rerouting profits and information to a separate coalition. He's been maneuvering the major crime families in this city into conflict with each other for years, slowly, carefully, in ways that look like natural friction. When they're weakened enough, when they've bled each other dry, he steps in as the only stable power remaining. He's been engineering a takeover, she said, a clean one, no war, just aftermath. Dante's voice was very controlled. Your father's shipping routes were the last infrastructure piece he needed. The routes connect 3 separate distribution networks that none of the families currently control directly. Whoever owns those routes controls the flow of goods through this entire corridor. Serena sat down, not because her legs gave out, because she needed to think, and she thought better when she was still. He destroyed my father's company to acquire access to those routes, and triggered the federal investigation to ensure the estate would be tied up long enough for him to move on the routes through a different mechanism. Using you, she said. He knew you'd get involved. He counted on it. My involvement would pull me into the financial structures around the Vale estate, which would expose my own organization to federal scrutiny at a moment when Lucien was already positioning to... He stopped, reconsidered. He wanted me occupied, looking at the wrong thing. And instead I walked in and started looking at the right thing. Yes, Dante said, which is why someone left that message. She pressed her fingers against her temples, not a headache, just the physical need to compress something. Lucien knows I found the filing. Someone told him, which means there is at minimum 1 person in this house, or close to it, feeding him information. The silence that followed that sentence had a different quality to it. Both of them were aware of it. How many people know I've been using the East Library, she said. Rosa. The cleaning staff, myself. He paused, and anyone who monitors the internal security system, which Lucien has administrative access to. He's been watching me. It's possible. She stood up. It's not possible, it's certain. If he has admin access to the cameras, he saw me open that laptop and pull up those filings, and he knows exactly what I found. She moved to the window because standing still was no longer an option. He sent a dead man as a warning because he wanted to see how I'd react. How we'd react. He's testing whether I'll move on him now with incomplete documentation and make an error, Dante said. Or whether I'll panic and run, she said. Will you? She turned around. What do you think? He looked at her for a moment with that same quality of attention he had in the restaurant, measuring, recalibrating. I think you won't, he said, but I need to know that for certain. You need to trust me, she said. Yes. That's a significant request given that this marriage is 6 weeks old, and we're currently discussing the fact that your second-in-command may have murdered my father's company and is now surveilling me through your own security system. I know what I'm asking, he said. She turned back to the window. The garden was fully visible now, fog burned off, the overgrown beds and the stone paths running through them catching early light. She thought about the notes in the margins of the books. She thought about the 2 place settings at one end of a table that could seat 20. She thought about him watching every exit of a room while appearing to watch nothing. Tell me what you need me to do, she said. She was not naive about what that meant. She had not arrived at it through affection or trust in the romantic sense. She had arrived at it through the specific, clear-eyed calculation of someone who understood that she was already inside this, already implicated, already named on a dead man's cocktail napkin, and that the only people who knew enough to navigate it were standing in this library. Dante told her. The plan had 3 components. The first, Serena would continue using the East Library in her normal pattern, accessing the same financial records, giving no indication that she knew about the camera. She would feed deliberate misinformation into her searches, data trails that suggested she was looking at a different subsidiary than the one she had actually found, misdirecting Lucien's attention toward a dead end. The second, Dante would arrange a meeting with Lucien under the pretense of a routine operational review, using the meeting to assess exactly how much Lucien knew and how prepared he was to move. The third, and the one Serena liked least, she would attend a public event with Dante the following evening, a meeting of several syndicate-adjacent business figures, and her presence was meant to signal that nothing had changed, no alarm had been raised, the Vale marriage was proceeding as the comfortable structural arrangement it had been announced to be. You want me to smile at people while knowing that one of them might be reporting back to the man who destroyed my family, she said. Yes, Dante said. Can you do that? I've been smiling at people who wanted to watch me fail my entire adult life, she said. Yes, I can do that. She spent the day in the library, performing normalcy for a camera, and it was one of the more quietly awful experiences of her life. Knowing she was being watched, knowing the watcher. Running deliberate searches on companies she had already ruled out, following paths she knew were empty, building a false picture with the same methodical care she would have given a real one. Her hands were steady, her face was neutral. The bird outside the window came back and resumed its tuneless repetition. At 2 p.m, Rosa appeared with coffee and a small plate of food that Serena had not asked for, and said, Mr. Sorrento thought you might not have eaten, and set both on the edge of the desk and left without waiting for a response. Serena stared at the coffee for a moment, then she drank it. Dante's meeting with Lucien happened at 4. She didn't witness it. What she had was a report delivered by Dante afterward, standing in the doorway of her room while she changed out of the clothes she'd worn all day, speaking to her through the partially open door with the matter-of-fact delivery of someone who had long ago separated professional information from personal discomfort. He was composed, Dante said, attentive, asked appropriate questions about 3 ongoing operations, gave no indication that anything was unusual. Which means he's good, she said. He's always been good. Did he ask about me? A pause. He asked how you were adjusting, said you seemed like a capable woman, said he was looking forward to getting to know you better. She stopped. He said that. Yes. While knowing his camera caught me pulling up his name in a financial filing yesterday. Yes. She finished with her clothing and opened the door fully. Dante was leaning against the hallway wall with his arms crossed, and he looked, not tired exactly, but worn in the way of someone who has been maintaining a structure under pressure for a long time and can feel the first places it wants to give. It was the most human she had seen him look. He's going to move before you can consolidate the documentation, she said. That's my assessment, yes. How long do we have? Days, maybe less. She nodded slowly. The event tomorrow night. He'll be there. Yes. He'll be watching both of us. Yes. And you still want to go. I need to see who he talks to, Dante said, who clusters around him, who moves when he moves. If he's building a coalition to move against me, those connections will be visible in a room that size to someone who knows what to look for. She thought of the dinner, the man in gray who hadn't looked at her, the woman in green. Two sets of eyes are better than one, she said. That was my thought. Then we go, she said. The event the following evening was held in a converted warehouse space in the old industrial quarter that someone had spent significant money making. Looked like it hadn't been spent on, exposed brick and low lighting and long tables that suggested collaborative informality while actually being structured very deliberately. Serena clocked all of this in the first 4 minutes. Lucian Graves was not what she expected either, and she was getting tired of that, of men in this world failing to look like what they were. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, silver at the temples, with the kind of face that read as trustworthy in the particular way of someone who had spent decades calibrating it. He smiled when Dante introduced them, and the smile reached his eyes just far enough to be convincing, and he took her hand and said, Serena, it's good to finally meet you properly. Dante speaks very highly of you. That's kind, she said, and smiled back with the smile she had been using her whole life in rooms full of men who underestimated her. He speaks very highly of you as well. 9 years is a long partnership. It is, Lucian said, and something shifted in his eyes. Very small, very fast. Loyalty is everything in this world. Isn't it? She said. She moved through the event on Dante's arm for the first hour, and without it for the second, because separating was tactically useful, and because she had told him she didn't need to be attached to him to be functional, and he had believed her, which she noted with something that wasn't quite gratitude but was adjacent to it. She watched Lucian. She watched him move through the room, and the contacts were subtle. A hand on an elbow here, a leaned-in conversation there, the specific choreography of a man tending a network. She identified 7 distinct interactions that read differently from the rest. 7 people who responded to him with a quality of attention that was qualitatively different from how they responded to Dante. More deferential, more careful. At the 90-minute mark, she located Dante at the far end of the room and made her way to him. She didn't touch his arm. She leaned close enough to speak without being overheard. 7 people, she said. I can give you descriptions and approximate positions. 3 of them I recognized from the dinner last week. He said nothing for 3 seconds. 7. He's further along than you thought. Dante's jaw tightened. A small movement. She felt it in the air between them. We need to leave, he said. Not yet, she said. If we leave early, he'll know something shifted. Serena? 20 more minutes, she said, and I want to talk to him alone. Absolutely not. He's not going to do anything in a room this full of witnesses, she said. And if I talk to him, if he thinks he's reading me and finding nothing, it buys us time. He'll wait to see what I know before he moves. You're asking me to let you walk into a conversation with a man who may have been responsible for your father's financial destruction, while knowing that he knows what you found, while performing ignorance. Yes, she said. That's what I'm asking. His jaw was still tight. If anything feels wrong, I'll touch my right hand to my collarbone, she said. Your people know the signal? A pause. They will in the next 2 minutes. Good, she said. And she walked away from him toward where Lucian Graves was standing with a glass of something amber, watching the room with the benign attention of a man who had all the time in the world. You're good at this, he said when she appeared beside him. At what? She said. Working a room. Reading people. He swirled the glass. Dante underestimates how much you contribute to his image, I think. You make him seem more human. He is human, she said. Lucian looked at her sideways. How are you finding it? Life in that house. The adjustment. Strange, she said honestly, but manageable. And the marriage itself? He can be closed. It's not personal. He's been that way for as long as I've known him. We understand each other, she said. You've been doing research, Lucienne said, casually, conversationally, no shift in his face. Into your father's accounts. I imagine that's a natural thing to want to understand. There it was. She kept her expression at mild, curious, faintly tired. It's a mess, she said. The corporate structure he built was much more complicated than I knew. I'm mostly just trying to understand what happened. Any illuminating discoveries? Lucian said. Mostly just confusion, she said. Layers and layers of holding companies all referencing each other. I'm not sure I'll ever get to the bottom of it. He smiled. Sometimes the bottom isn't worth finding, he said. It's better to let the past stay where it is. Maybe, she said. She let a beat go by. Although I did find one name that keeps recurring in some of the subsidiary structures. I haven't figured out what the connection is yet. Some family named Crestline Holdings. Have you heard of it? Crestline Holdings was the misdirection she had spent the previous day building. It was real, a minor shell company with no significant connections. But it was the thread she had been visibly pulling in the library for the camera all day. Lucian's expression didn't change, but he took a sip of his drink, and the sip was a fraction of a second longer than casual, and she knew, with the certainty of someone who had been watching men manage their tells for years, that he recognized the name as the thing she'd been looking at, and that he was relieved. Can't say I do, he said pleasantly. Probably nothing, she said, and smiled. I should find Dante. It was good to meet you properly, Lucienne. The pleasure was mine, he said. She walked back across the room toward Dante, and she did not allow herself to feel the way her hands wanted to shake, or the way her breathing had gone shallow and too controlled during those 3.5 minutes. She found Dante near the far wall and stood beside him without taking his arm and said, very quietly, He took the bait. Dante's exhale was something she could barely hear. Good. He's going to hold, she said. For now, he thinks I'm looking at the wrong thing, and he's going to wait to see if I find the right one before he decides to move. Which buys us time to... His phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. Whatever he saw did something to his face that she hadn't seen before. A rapid, violent compression, there and gone in under a second, but she saw it. We need to go, he said. What happened? He moved toward the exit, and she followed because she had learned that when he moved that fast, staying still was the wrong choice. In the car, he said, The documentation I've been building on Lucien, the compiled case against him, was being held by 2 people in my organization, people I trusted completely. He paused. One of them was found in the river an hour ago. The other isn't answering. The car moved through the city. The lights outside were doing their ordinary nighttime things. Traffic signals, storefronts, the indifferent living of millions of people who had no idea what was dissolving inside this vehicle. Serena looked at the side of Dante's face, the scar along his jaw, the controlled and careful nothing of his expression. The documentation is gone, she said. Without it, I have no verifiable case to bring to the other families. Without the other families, I have no coalition to counter what Lucian is building. His voice was very flat. And without that, he moves, she said. He moves against you directly. Within 48 hours, possibly less. Dante's hands were still in his lap. They were, she noticed, absolutely motionless. The specific stillness of someone exerting significant physical will over something that wanted very badly to move. I have been outmaneuvered, he said, by someone in my own house, using my own systems, for longer than I want to calculate. The car stopped at a red light. The city went on doing its ordinary things. Serena thought about her father's files, the financial records she had been cross-referencing for weeks, the original documents, not the copies the federal case was built on, the raw corporate filings and communications she had been painstakingly reconstructing from public sources. She had them. Not complete, not the compiled, verified package that had just gone into the river, but she had the underlying architecture of it, the bones. "I have something," she said. Dante turned. "It's not everything," she said. "It's not the compiled case your people were building. But I have the original source documentation, the filings, the subsidiary structures, the communication trails I found in my father's corporate records. I've been building a parallel record of the same network from the public side, without knowing that's what I was doing." She held his gaze. "It's not a finished weapon, but it might be enough of one." He looked at her for a long time. "My father taught me how to read a balance sheet when I was 16, she said. "He said, every number wants to tell you something. I have been sitting in your library for 6 weeks letting them talk." "If you have what you're describing," Dante said, "then we have a chance." "We have a chance," she said, "but we have to move fast, before Lucien realizes I have it, before he stops waiting and starts—" The rear window of the car exploded inward. The sound was enormous and immediate, the specific, disorienting violence of safety glass giving way. And then the car was swerving, and there was shouting from the front seat, and Dante's hand was on her head, pushing her down into the seat, his body half covering hers, and she could feel him breathing fast against the back of her neck, hard and controlled, not panicked, but working. The car accelerated. More sounds. Not gunfire, not yet. Something else. The impact of another vehicle. Deliberate. A second hit to the passenger side. She kept her face pressed against the seat leather and thought, very clearly, 48 hours was optimistic. Lucien Graves had stopped waiting. The car didn't stop moving for 11 minutes. Serena counted them by feel. The swerves, the accelerations, the 2 more impacts that hit the rear quarter panel like hammer blows and sent the whole vehicle sideways across what sounded like wet asphalt. She stayed down. Dante's arm was across her back, not gentle, not tender. Functional. The arm of someone pinning a person to safety with the same deliberate force you'd use to hold a door shut against a storm. She could feel his ribs expanding and contracting against her shoulder. Fast. Controlled. The driver said something in clipped operational shorthand she didn't fully catch. Dante responded in the same register. She caught the words East Gate and sweep and confirm. The car took a hard left and then accelerated for what felt like a long straight before the road surface changed beneath them. Gravel, then concrete, then the sound of a heavy gate mechanism, automated, already opening as they arrived. Then they stopped. Dante lifted his arm. She sat up. They were inside a structure, warehouse, industrial. She couldn't tell in the dark except that the ceiling was high and the air smelled of machine oil and cold concrete. 3 other vehicles were already there, engines off, men moving around them with flashlights and the compact, unhurried efficiency of people who had done this specific kind of thing before. Someone was already pulling the damaged rear door of their car open to assess. Dante got out. She followed. He was on his phone before his feet hit the ground, and she stood 2 steps behind him in the dark and let her eyes adjust and breathed. Slow, deliberate. The 4-count rhythm she used when her chest wanted to do something she wasn't going to let it do. Her hands were steady. She noted that with something close to clinical detachment. Her hands were steady, and she was going to keep them that way. She counted 8 men in the space. She did not recognize any of them, which meant they were not from the mansion's regular security rotation, which meant Dante had contingency people she hadn't known about. She filed that away. He finished the call, came back to her. In the thin light, his face was very precise. All the performed calm stripped back to something that was actual calm, which was different, colder, more useful. "We're 40 minutes from the house," he said. "We're not going back tonight." "My laptop," she said, "already secured. One of my people pulled it within 10 minutes of us leaving the event." "How did you know we'd need—" "I didn't," he said. "I planned for the possibility. There's a difference." He scanned the room once, a fast sweep that took in every position and exit, and then looked back at her. "Are you hurt?" She checked. Shoulders tight. A small cut on her left forearm from the glass she hadn't felt happen. Nothing structural. "No." He looked at the cut on her arm. Something moved through his expression. Fast, contained. He looked away. We'll get that cleaned. It's fine, she said. I know it's fine, he said. We'll still get it cleaned. She didn't argue. She was picking her arguments now with more care than she ever had in her life. They were in the safe house, which was what it was, she understood now, a prepared fallback position stocked with the specific supplies of people who anticipated needing to disappear on short notice, for 40 minutes before the first new information came in. A man named Cord, who had the compact build and the careful eyes of someone who had been in the kind of work that leaves marks you don't discuss, came to where Dante and Serena were sitting at a table with her laptop open between them. The second source, Cord said. The one who wasn't answering. Alive? Dante said. Alive, Cord said. Detained. Lucien's people have him at a location in the Port District. A pause. He's been talking. The word landed in the room. Dante's jaw set. How long? Unknown. Could be hours. Could be longer. What has he given them? Cord looked briefly at Serena, a quick professional assessment of whether she should be in the room for this. Dante said, Tell me, without looking at Cord, and his voice carried the specific freight of someone who was not going to say the same thing twice. Cord told him. The source, a man Serena had never met, a financial analyst who had been constructing the evidentiary case against Lucien from the inside of the organization's own accounting systems, had given up two things. First, the existence of a secondary documentation set that Dante had been building in parallel with the primary case, stored on an encrypted server at a location in the financial district. Second, and worse, the knowledge that Serena had been conducting her own investigation from the library and that her research had potentially intersected with real evidentiary material. He gave them me, Serena said. He gave them the possibility of you, Cord said. We don't know how specific. He gave them me, she said again, not angry, just precise. So Lucien now knows that the Crestline trail was misdirection. He knows I found something real. Cord looked at Dante. Yes, Dante said. She closed her eyes for 3 seconds, opened them. The secondary server. Lucien will move on it tonight, Dante said. Can you get to it first? Possibly. If we move now, if the team I send doesn't encounter resistance. He paused. It's a significant if. Then we need something else, she said. Even if you get the server, he knows we have documentation. He'll move to discredit it. He'll move to neutralize the people who could verify it. He has 7 contacts in that room tonight, and we don't know who else. She pressed her palms flat on the table. We need to change the game. Stop playing defense. Dante looked at her for a moment. What are you thinking? I've been thinking about it since the car, she said. The subsidiary structure I found, the connections between Lucien's network and my father's creditors. I have the source documents, not copies. The original corporate filings, the communication trails, the financial architecture. I built the map from the bottom up, which means it doesn't rely on anything from inside your organization. It can't be discredited as fabricated by you. It's entirely external sourcing. But it's not verified by anyone outside of your own research, Dante said. It doesn't have to be verified by a person, she said. It has to be delivered to the right people in a form they can verify themselves. The other syndicate heads, the families Lucien has been maneuvering against each other for years. If they receive the underlying source documents directly, with the architecture clear enough to trace, they'll verify it with their own people. They have every reason to. Dante was quiet. He's been playing them against each other, she said. Every one of them has lost people, territory, money, because of moves Lucien engineered to look like attacks from their rivals. The moment they understand that, the moment they see the documentation that proves it, he loses every alliance he has. His coalition collapses before it moves. Getting that documentation to 7 different heads of family, simultaneously, securely, in a time frame that, I know how to do it, she said. He looked at her. My father's shipping network, she said. The communication infrastructure. It still exists. It's in federal hold, but the systems themselves are still active. The secure messaging architecture is still functional. I know the access credentials because I built a recovery archive 3 months ago when I was trying to understand what had happened to the company. She held his gaze. I can push a data package through that network to every major node simultaneously. It's the infrastructure Lucian wants to control. I'll use it against him before he can. The room was very quiet. Your father's network, Dante said slowly. Yes. The same network that's at the center of everything Lucian has been maneuvering toward for 3 years. Yes. Something was moving in his face that she couldn't entirely read. Calculation, but underneath it something else, something older and less comfortable. Serena, he said, there's something I should have told you before now. She waited. Your father and I knew each other, Dante said. Before any of this. Before the debts. Before the federal case. Before you. He said it without preamble, without softening, the way he said things when they were true and uncomfortable. 14 years ago, I was in a situation, a significant one, the kind that ends careers or ends lives, and your father helped me. He didn't know exactly who I was. He knew enough, and he helped anyway. He paused. He didn't do it for payment. He did it because he said it was the right thing to do, and he didn't seem troubled by the complexity of that. She was very still. The marriage, Dante said, the offer I made to your family, it wasn't purely structural, it wasn't purely strategic. His voice was flat, but underneath the flatness was the texture of something he had been carrying alone for a long time. I made a promise, 14 years ago, to a man who helped me survive. I told him that if he ever needed anything, I would be there. He never called in that promise. He died before he could. The scar along his jaw tightened slightly. This was my way of honoring it. Serena felt something move through her that she didn't have an immediate name for. Not anger, or not only anger, something more complicated and more personal. You could have told me that, she said. I didn't know how you'd receive it, he said. Whether you'd see it as manipulation, using your father's memory to make the arrangement seem more palatable than it was. It would have been more palatable, she said. I know, he said. That's why I didn't use it. She sat with that for a moment. Outside the safe house walls, the city was doing what cities do at this hour. Indifferent, continuous, entirely unaware. Somewhere in the Port District, a man who knew too much was telling people what he knew. Somewhere in the Financial District, an encrypted server was running out of time. Somewhere in this city, Lucian Graves was looking at a map and deciding he had waited long enough. Okay, she said finally. Okay? He said it carefully, like the word might mean several different things. I'm not finished being angry about it, she said. But okay, we keep moving. She pulled the laptop toward her. I need 2 hours with the shipping network access. I need to rebuild the data package and design the delivery structure. I need someone on your end who can confirm current contact channels for the family heads. She looked up at him. And I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. I do, he said. You say that very easily for someone who kept a 14-year secret for my own protection. I'm going to keep making mistakes, he said, but not that one again. She almost said something to that. She didn't. She opened the laptop instead. She worked for an hour and 50 minutes. Cord brought her coffee at the 40-minute mark, and she drank it without looking up. Dante moved around the space at the edge of her periphery, making calls, coordinating the move on the secondary server, managing the invisible logistics of a network that was trying not to come apart at its seams. She was aware of him the way you're aware of a structural element in a building. Not consciously, but in the background, in the sense that its absence would register immediately. The data package took shape. It was not elegant. It was the most precise version of what she had, organized for maximum clarity. The subsidiary connections, the financial trails, the engineered conflicts between the families traced back to their manufactured origins, every thread sourced to public documentation that could be independently verified. She wrote a cover document explaining the architecture and language that assumed the reader was intelligent and in a hurry. She did not write it to be persuasive. She wrote it to be clear, because clarity was more dangerous than persuasion when the information was true. She was 40 minutes from finished when Cord appeared again. His face was different this time. The server, he said to Dante. Did we get it? Dante said. We got there, Cord said. But the data was wiped 40 minutes ago. Someone with remote access cleared it before our team arrived. Dante said nothing for 3 seconds. The second source is still detained. Yes, Cord said. But he wasn't the only person with remote access credentials. The implication sat in the room. Who else had credentials, Serena said. Cord looked at Dante. Who else? She said again. 3 people, Dante said. The analyst they have. Myself. He stopped. And? She said. Rosa, he said. The name hit her like cold water. Rosa, who had appeared every morning with coffee and professional courtesy and zero curiosity, who had laid a perfectly fitted red dress across her bed without asking her size, who had been in the house since before Serena arrived, managing every system, every room, every routine, who had access to every schedule, every pattern, every moment of every day that Serena had spent in that library. Rosa works for Lucien, Serena said. It appears so, Dante said, and the flatness in his voice was the controlled version of something that was not flat at all. She was the camera, Serena said, not just watching through it, managing what it captured, selecting what Lucien saw. Yes. Which means she knew I was misdirecting him with the Crestline trail. The silence that followed that sentence had its own specific weight. She let me believe it was working, Serena said. She let you believe we had time. She was managing us, feeding us enough rope to… She stopped, thought back. The coffee at 2 in the afternoon. Mr. Sorrento thought you might not have eaten. She was reporting my daily schedule, my research patterns. Every time I got close to something real, she would have flagged it immediately. Which means Lucien knew about the source documents you described, Dante said. Your father's shipping network access, the reconstruction you've been building. He's known for days, she said. Then why wait, Cord said. Because he wanted to see what she'd do with it, Dante said, and his voice was very quiet. He was watching to see if she'd hand it to me, if I'd try to use it. He wanted to understand the full shape of what we had before he moved to take it. Serena looked at the laptop screen. The data package, 40 minutes from complete. The shipping network credentials open in a separate window. He's going to move on the network, she said, not just the server. If he knew I had access to my father's communication infrastructure, he'll move to lock me out of it, permanently. How long do you need? Dante said. 30 minutes, she said. Maybe less. Our window is smaller than that, Cord said. We have signals that Lucien's people are moving on the port district infrastructure right now. They're not coming for us. They're going for the network nodes directly. How long before they reach the primary hub? Dante said. 20 minutes, possibly 15. Serena was already typing. Then stop talking, she said. She worked with the particular, focused intensity of someone who has converted fear into fuel, which is not the same as not being afraid. It is, in fact, the thing you do precisely because you are afraid. And there is no option that isn't. Her fingers moved, and she didn't look at anything except the screen and the architecture unfolding across it. She could hear Dante on the phone behind her, hear the cadence of a man coordinating something fast and dangerous, hear Cord's voice and another man's voice running logistics she wasn't tracking because she could not track them and do this simultaneously. 12 minutes. 13. Serena, Dante said. Almost, she said. They're at the outer perimeter of the hub. Almost, she said. She finished the package at 16 minutes and 40 seconds. She did not review it. She did not check it twice. She opened the delivery architecture and she sent it, all 7 recipients simultaneously, through the secure messaging backbone of Vale Shipping International, her father's network, the infrastructure a man had built over 30 years that someone had tried to use as a weapon, and that she was now firing back through like an answer to a question nobody had wanted her to ask. The confirmation receipts came in over the next 90 seconds, 7 of them, delivered. She sat back. Her hands were shaking. She noticed this with the same clinical detachment she had applied to everything else in the last 6 hours. Her hands were shaking, and that was a reasonable physiological response, and she was going to allow it for approximately 30 seconds, and then she was going to be done with it. Dante was beside her. She didn't hear him cross the room. He was just there, looking at the screen. It's done, she said. Yes, he said. They'll verify it or they won't, she said. If even 3 of them verify it and move on Lucien before he can consolidate, he loses the coalition, Dante said. He loses the cover. He's exposed. Yes. She expected him to say something about the timing, about the next steps, about the operational sequence. He didn't. He was looking at her hands, which were still shaking, and his expression was the one she had seen twice before. The real one. Underneath the performed calm. The one that looked like a man and not a structure. You should rest, he said. I'm fine, she said. You've been running on adrenaline for 6 hours, he said. You're allowed to stop for 20 minutes. When it's over, she said. This part is over, he said. She looked at the confirmation receipts on the screen. 7 delivered messages, 7 timestamps. The last thing her father's shipping network would ever transmit, firing out into the night like a flare from a sinking ship that had already been salvaged. She thought about her father teaching her to read a balance sheet at the kitchen table when she was 16, his patient voice explaining that every number was a question waiting to be answered. She thought about the notes in the margins of Dante's books, the terse disagreements with authors, the question marks next to passages that wanted to go unchallenged. She thought about Rosa laying a red dress across a bed with careful hands and the face of a woman performing neutrality. She was aware that she was very tired. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She looked at Dante. He nodded. She answered. Lucien Graves's voice was not what she expected. She had braced for cold, for anger, for the compressed fury of someone who had just watched a plan 3 years in the making take a serious wound. What she got instead was something she was entirely unprepared for. He sounded calm, more than calm. He sounded like a man who still had cards she hadn't seen. That was impressive, he said. Your father would have been proud. Don't, she said. I mean it sincerely, he said. The reconstruction you built from public sources alone, I underestimated how much you'd absorbed from him. We all did. A pause. But Serena, and I'm going to use your name because I think we're past formalities. You've sent a data package to 7 people based on the assumption that they'll believe it, verify it, and move on that information before I can respond. Another pause. I've already responded. Her stomach went cold. What does that mean? It means I had contingencies, he said. It means the moment your package arrived at those 7 recipients, a second package arrived simultaneously, from me. Documented evidence that the financial records you compiled were fabricated, specifically designed to implicate me, commissioned by Dante Sorrento as a preemptive strike against a subordinate who had discovered Dante's own financial misconduct. His voice was almost gentle. Evidence, Serena, not assertions. Time-stamped, corroborated, and provided by sources inside your own household. Rosa, she said. Among others, he said. It's fabricated, she said. Of course it is, he said pleasantly. So is the claim that yours is. The families don't know who to believe, which means they'll do what they always do when they're uncertain. He let that land. They'll wait. And while they wait, I'm going to do something very simple. I'm going to take Dante Sorrento into custody on charges of murder. Specifically, the murders of 3 rival family heads over the last 8 months, for which I now have what I will characterize as overwhelming evidence. And I'm going to walk that documentation to every law enforcement contact I have, simultaneously with an internal tribunal of the assembled families. He didn't kill anyone, she said. I know, Lucien said. But you're going to have a very difficult time proving that from whatever safe house you're currently hiding in while he's in custody, while your family's assets are being reviewed by a federal investigation that has just received a tip about new evidence relevant to your father's case. His voice was still almost gentle, which was the worst thing about it. I don't want to hurt you, Serena. I want you to understand that you have one option remaining that doesn't end badly for everyone you care about. Tell me, she said, because she needed to hear it, needed to understand exactly what she was refusing. Walk away, he said. Take your mother and your brother and walk away from Dante Sorrento and everything connected to him. I'll ensure the federal hold on your father's estate is resolved. I'll ensure your brother's education is funded. I'll ensure your mother's medical situation is handled. All of it, done, permanent. You go back to your life. You never speak about this. A pause. Dante goes to prison, which is where he was always going eventually, and the world reorganizes itself in the way it was already going to, just on a slightly accelerated timetable. She said nothing. You have until 6 a.m., he said. After that, the warrants are filed and the situation becomes significantly more complicated for everyone. The call ended. She put the phone on the table. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at Dante, who had been close enough to hear both sides, and whose face was doing something she had never seen it do before. A rigidity that was not calm, not performed, not controlled. Something underneath all of it pushing at the surface. He's going to frame you for 3 murders, she said. Yes, Dante said. He has fabricated evidence. Yes. And a household source who will testify that my documentation was constructed on your instructions. Yes. She looked at the laptop. At the 7 delivered messages, now poisoned by a counter-narrative arriving in the same breath. At the secondary server, wiped. At the source in the port district, still detained and still talking. At the 9-year partnership dissolving into a frame that had been constructed with the patience and care of something built to last. He's better at this than we thought, she said. Yes, Dante said. He is. She stood up, walked to the far wall of the safe house, and stood there with her hands at her sides and her back to the room for 60 seconds. And she let herself feel the specific physical weight of a situation that had just gotten significantly worse than the worst version she had been preparing for. She let herself feel it fully, the way you had to feel something real before you could think past it. Then she turned around. He made a mistake, she said. Dante waited. He called me, she said. He didn't have to. He has the warrants ready. He has the frame constructed. He has the counter-narrative in play. He didn't need to call. He called because he wants me to walk away, which means he's still worried about something I have that he can't fully control. She crossed back to the table. What does he not have yet? Dante was very still. The original, she said. Not the reconstruction. Not the package I sent. The original documents for my father's company. The physical records. They exist somewhere. My father kept physical backups of everything because he didn't trust digital systems, and I have been so focused on the digital reconstruction that I never... She stopped. Where does the federal seizure order cover? Dante moved to the laptop, pulled up the federal filing. She leaned over his shoulder and they read it together, and there it was. The scope of the seizure covered all digital assets, all financial instruments, all property at the primary residence and the company offices. It doesn't cover the warehouse, she said. What warehouse? My father had a storage facility outside the city, old inventory space from before the company expanded. It wasn't listed in any of the corporate filings because he transferred it to a personal trust 15 years ago, before Vail Shipping went fully incorporated. Her voice was very steady. He kept everything there. Physical records, contracts, correspondence. 15 years of paper documentation that was never digitized because he didn't trust the cloud. Dante looked at her. Lucien doesn't know it exists, she said. Rosa doesn't know it exists. Nobody knows it exists except me and my mother and whatever federal agent was too thorough or not thorough enough when they cataloged the estate. She held his gaze. If the original documentation is there, and I believe it is, it doesn't matter what counter-narrative he's built. You can't fabricate your way around physical originals. We'd need to reach it before 6 a.m., Dante said. Yes, she said. And it's outside the city. Yes, she said. And Lucien's people are watching every road we'd take. Yes, she said. So we go a different way. The safe house was very quiet. Somewhere outside, the city continued its indifferent night. The 6 a.m. deadline was sitting on the horizon like a thing with teeth, and between here and the warehouse was every obstacle Lucien Graves had spent 3 years building, and the person standing across the table from her had 14 years of a debt to her father written somewhere underneath the scar on his jaw, and her hands had stopped shaking, and she was already thinking about the route. Tell me you have a boat, she said. Dante looked at her for one long moment, and then something happened on his face that she had not seen there before. Not the beginning of a smile that didn't finish arriving, not the measured assessment, not the performed calm.
something real and uncomplicated that she filed away in the specific place she kept things she didn't have words for yet. "I have two," he said. The boat was a 40-foot working vessel that smelled of diesel and brine, and the specific kind of use that doesn't get cleaned off, only layered over. Cord drove them to a private dock 20 minutes from the safe house, a slip tucked behind a commercial fishing operation that was either legitimate or wasn't, and Serena didn't ask because there was no version of the answer that changed what they needed to do in the next 4 hours. Dante knew the boat. He moved onto it with the ease of someone who had been on it before, checking things without narrating them, lines, engine, something in a panel near the helm that he looked at, and then closed without comment. The man who handed him the keys was 60, weathered to the texture of old rope, and said nothing at all. Serena liked him immediately. She sat at the stern while Dante took the helm, and Cord stayed on the dock because there were things that needed to be managed from land, and Cord was the person who could manage them. Contacting the remaining loyal members of the organization, monitoring Lucian's movements, tracking the 6 a.m. deadline the way you track an incoming weather system. He would not be able to stop the warrants, but he could tell them the moment they were filed. The engine turned over and they moved out into the dark water. The river was wide here, and black, and the city lit the sky above the far bank in an orange smear that made the stars irrelevant. Serena watched it fall behind them as Dante pushed the throttle up and the boat found its speed. Wind off the water, cold and direct. She didn't move inside. She stayed at the stern and watched the wake and thought about her father. He had kept physical backups of everything because he didn't trust the cloud. He had said more than once that digital things disappeared when someone wanted them to, but paper was harder to make vanish without leaving the absence of itself. She had thought of it as old-fashioned. Now she understood it as the stubbornness of a man who had survived enough to know that the systems other people controlled could always be turned against you. He had survived enough. He just hadn't survived everything. Dante cut the engine back as they approached the outer edge of the river's industrial quarter, where the water widened and the banks went dark and unlit. Old warehouse structures sitting back from concrete loading platforms that hadn't seen regular use since the shipping operations consolidated north. He navigated by instrument and by some knowledge of this stretch of water that she hadn't known he had. "You've been here before," she said. "Once," he said, "a long time ago." She didn't ask more. She was learning the architecture of what he told voluntarily versus what he held until it was relevant, and she was starting to understand that the second category was not evasion. It was the discipline of a man who had spent his life in environments where unnecessary information was a liability for the person carrying it. The warehouse appeared on the north bank at 3:40 in the morning, a low-profile structure of corrugated metal and old brick that her father had bought 22 years ago for inventory storage and kept long after he stopped needing it for that purpose. Serena knew it from childhood. She had come here twice with him, sat in his car while he went inside, and came out 40 minutes later carrying nothing visible, which she had understood even then as the activity of a man managing things that required privacy. Dante brought the boat to the loading platform. She jumped the 18-inch gap between deck and concrete before he finished tying off, and she felt the impact of the landing in her knees and her hip and ignored it completely. Already moving toward the warehouse's side entrance, pulling the key from the inside pocket of her jacket, where she had put it before leaving the house 3 days ago out of some instinct she hadn't examined at the time. The lock was stiff. She worked it. Inside, dark, cold, the smell of old paper and dust and the faint chemical trace of the industrial solvent her father had used to clean everything, always, before storing it. Metal shelving units running floor to ceiling, cardboard boxes, filing cabinet banks against the far wall in the dark gray of objects that had been sitting for years and planned to sit for more. She pulled out her phone for light and moved to the filing cabinets. Dante was behind her, close but not crowding, his own phone light adding to hers. She heard his breathing, steady, unhurried, the breathing of someone managing their body with deliberate attention. "What are we looking for specifically?" he said. "Corporate correspondence files 2009 through 2014, she said. The period when the subsidiary structure Lucian used was being established. My father would have had direct communication with at least some of the creditor companies during their legitimate phase, before they were converted to shell infrastructure.
That correspondence will predate any fabrication Lucian could have constructed, and it will show the original relationship between my father's company and those entities as they actually existed. She opened the third cabinet. Wrong decade, fourth cabinet. She pulled a drawer and the smell of old paper came up stronger. The tabs were in her father's handwriting, which stopped her for exactly 1 second. That specific forward-leaning script she had grown up reading on grocery lists and birthday cards and the backs of documents he handed her to learn from. She found the 2009 drawer, started pulling files. "Here," she said. She pulled 6 folders and handed 3 to Dante, and they stood in the cold dark of her father's storage facility, reading by phone light, and the world outside continued toward its 6 a.m. deadline without them. The correspondence was there. All of it. Her father's direct communications with the companies that had become Lucian's shell infrastructure, covering a period of 4 years, initially legitimate, then increasingly irregular, as the companies began to behave in ways her father had apparently found puzzling enough to document his confusion in writing. She found a letter he had drafted, but possibly never sent, to an attorney, describing his growing concern that 3 of his regular creditors seemed to be operating in coordination rather than independently, and that some of the loan restructuring terms they were offering felt designed to increase his debt load rather than resolve it. He had known something was wrong. He just hadn't known what. She pressed the letter flat against the shelf and photographed it with her phone, hand steady now, with the particular steadiness of someone who has found what they were looking for and understands exactly what it costs. "I need all of this digitized," she said. "How long?" 20 minutes if I photograph everything systematic. Another 10 to package it for transmission." She looked at him. "Can we get an uplink from here?" "My satellite relay runs on the boat," he said. Signal will reach." 18 minutes later, she had 340 photographs covering 11 folders of original correspondence, financial records, and her father's handwritten notes. She packaged them on her phone in the compressed format she had been using for the data reconstruction and forwarded it to Dante's relay, and from there it went out to the same 7 recipients as before. But this time, with a cover document she wrote in 4 minutes that was nothing except a list of dates, document types, and the simple declarative statement that these were physical originals from a private storage facility that had never appeared in any corporate filing, could not have been fabricated by either party, and predated any allegation of evidence construction by a minimum of 8 years. She sent it at 4:17 a.m., and then they heard the engines outside. Not water, land. Vehicles on the access road that ran along the north bank, 2, possibly 3, moving fast without lights, which meant they knew where they were going and didn't want to announce themselves until they were already there. Dante said, "Get to the back of the building," and his voice had a quality she hadn't heard before, stripped down to pure operational directive, no texture in it at all. "How did they find us?" she said, already moving. "Rosa knew about the boat," he said. "She knew the dock." He was moving too, toward the front of the building, toward the single high window that looked out over the access road. "I should have accounted for it." "You thought about the roads," she said, "not the dock." "Same result," he said. She got to the back wall. There was a secondary exit. She remembered it from childhood, a rolling door for large equipment that her father had said hadn't been opened in years. She found the manual release in the dark by running her hands along the wall until the lever met her fingers, and she pulled. The door was seized with rust in years. It moved 6 inches and stopped. Outside, the vehicles had stopped. She could hear doors, voices, muffled. At least 4 people, maybe 6. She put her shoulder into the rolling door and pushed. "Serena!" Dante's voice from the front, low and sharp. "Working on it," she said through her teeth. The door moved another 4 inches, grinding, objecting loudly to being asked to function. A bang at the front entrance. Not a knock. Something harder, metal against metal. The door gave. 8 more inches, then a foot, then enough. She ducked through into the cold outside air and the darkness of the bank behind the building. The river 20 feet away. The boat still tied at the platform to the left. She turned back to the gap and said, low and urgent, "Dante." He was already there. He came through the gap without slowing, and his hand found her arm in the dark, and they moved, fast, low, along the back wall of the building toward the platform. Behind them, the front of the warehouse came open with a sound that meant it hadn't been unlocked. The platform was 30 feet. 20. 10. A shout from somewhere behind them, back around the building's corner. Someone had gone around the side faster than she'd calculated, and the gap between them and the boat was still 15 feet and collapsing. Dante said, "Go!" And she went. She ran the last 15 feet at full speed and cleared the gap between platform and deck without looking at the water between, landed hard on her knees on the deck, and was already up when Dante landed 2 seconds behind her. He was at the helm before she found her balance. The engine turned over on the first try, which she would think about later with something close to gratitude, and then they were moving and the lines were still attached and they snapped under tension and came free, and the boat pulled away from the platform with a lurch that sent her into the gunwale hard enough to leave something she'd find bruised in the morning. A light from the platform, flashlight, powerful, swept across the water and found them and stayed on them. Then a sound she recognized from the car, the specific report of a weapon discharging and something hitting the water 15 feet off the stern. Dante pushed the throttle to its stop. The boat accelerated. The light followed them for 30 seconds, then the distance ate it, and they were in the dark again and moving fast down the center of the river, the city's orange sky ahead of them and the warehouse falling behind. Serena was at the stern, breathing hard, her hands on the gunwale, watching the platform disappear. She was aware of pain in her knees and her right hip and along her forearm where the glass cut from the car had been, which had apparently opened again during the run. She pressed her sleeve against it. "You're bleeding," Dante said from the helm. "I noticed," she said. "Badly?" "No." He said nothing for a moment. The engine was loud and the water was loud and everything else was the city doing its indifferent thing. "The package went out," she said, "before they arrived. They didn't stop it." "I know," he said. "So now we have 2 packages in play, to the same 7 recipients, and they're trying to determine which is real." "The original documentation should resolve that," he said, "if they engage with it." "Will they?" He didn't answer immediately, and she understood why. It was not a question with a certain answer, and Dante Sorrento had apparently decided, at some point in the last several weeks, that he was not going to give her false comfort in place of true information. "Some of them will," he said. "The ones Lucien has hurt most. They'll want it to be true, which means they'll look at the evidence carefully enough to see that it is. And the others? We need to be in a position to apply pressure before they decide," he said. Her phone vibrated. "Cord." She answered. "The warrants dropped," Cord said. 4:52 a.m. 3 counts of first-degree murder, all citing fabricated evidence. Federal detainer as well. Lucien moved on the corruption angle simultaneously. A pause. "He's moving fast." "We know," she said. "What about the families?" 2 of the 7 have responded to the second package, Cord said. Torrance and Vega. Both are requesting verification meetings. Neutral location. They want Dante in person. She looked at Dante. Torrance and Vega want a meeting, in person. He didn't hesitate. "When?" "When can you be in the city?" Cord said. 40 minutes, Dante mouthed. 40 minutes, she said into the phone. "I'll set the location," Cord said. "And Serena, Lucian knows you went to the warehouse. He'll know the second package contains originals. He's going to move to discredit your chain of custody on the physical documents." "How?" she said. "He'll say they were planted, that you had access to your father's archive and used it to construct false originals." A beat. "He'll need a witness to make that claim stick. Someone who knew about the warehouse." "No one knew about the warehouse," she said, "except my mother." The pause on the other end of the line was very short, very specific. "Cord," she said. "What?" "Lucian's people contacted your mother 2 hours ago," Cord said. "We picked up the communication through a monitoring tap Dante had on the house phone. They offered her the same deal he offered you. Walk away, full resolution, full restoration of assets. And they asked her specifically about your father's storage facilities." The river moved under the boat. The city got closer. "What did she say?" Serena said. Her voice was very flat. "She asked for until morning," Cord said. "To think about it." She lowered the phone. Her mother. Elaine Vale,
61, medically fragile, who had watched federal agents catalog her home with the expression of someone too exhausted to be afraid. Who had said nothing when Serena took the preliminary agreement out of her bag and signed her name to a marriage contract she hadn't chosen. Who had nodded once, a small compressed nod that said, "I understand what you're doing, and I cannot stop you, and I am not sure I would if I could." Her mother, who had been sitting in a house under federal hold with a phone that Lucien Graves's people knew the number of, being offered a way out that didn't cost her daughter's freedom. Serena understood. She understood exactly the weight of that choice from the inside, because she had made a version of it herself. That didn't make the next 60 seconds any easier. Dante had cut the engine slightly, the boat settling to a lower speed, and he was watching her from the helm with the expression that was not calm and not performed, and that she was beginning to understand meant he was watching her the way you watched something that mattered. "She might not tell them anything," she said.
She might not, Dante said. She doesn't know about the warehouse. She knows about storage space, General. He used to mention it, but she doesn't know the location, the contents. She knows about the key, Dante said quietly. Serena's hand went to her jacket pocket, the key that had been there for 3 days from an instinct she hadn't examined, an instinct her mother might have known about because Elaine Vale had been in that house during those 3 days and had watched her daughter move through the rooms and pack a bag, and might have seen, might have noticed. If Lucien gets an affidavit from her that you had advanced knowledge and personal access to that storage facility, Dante said, he doesn't need to prove the documents are fabricated. He just needs to introduce sufficient doubt about your chain of custody to neutralize the package with the families who haven't already committed. "The 5 who haven't responded yet," she said. "Yes." "How do we stop it?" "We don't," he said. "Not directly. We can't control what your mother does or doesn't say." His voice was very careful. "What we can do is reach the 2 families who've already responded, make that meeting, and secure enough of a coalition in the next 90 minutes that Lucien's move on your mother's testimony becomes strategically irrelevant." "Torrance and Vega," she said. 2 families. "It's enough to start," he said. "If they verify the originals and commit publicly, the others will have to respond to that rather than to Lucien's counter-narrative. They won't want to be on the wrong side of 2 family heads who've already moved." "It's a cascade," she said. "Yes, momentum." "And the warrants?" "I have attorneys who can hold the federal detainer for at least 6 hours," he said. "The murder charges will take longer to engage with. But if the families move against Lucien before law enforcement can fully process his fabricated evidence, he loses his credibility with every contact he has," she said, "including law enforcement contacts." "Yes." She stood at the stern of the boat in the cold air above the Black River and thought about her mother picking up a phone. About a woman who had already lost a husband and a house and the structural certainty of a life she had lived for 30 years being offered a way to get some of it back. About the specific, unbearable mathematics of that choice. She hoped her mother chose the wrong thing. Not because she was angry, because she understood it, and understanding it was not the same as not hoping. The city came back to meet them as Dante pushed the throttle up again, and the orange sky above the far bank had begun to show the first gray edge of something that was not yet dawn but was thinking about it. Her phone went again. Not cord this time. Not an unknown number. Her mother's name on the screen. She answered. "Serena." Her mother's voice was low and tight, the voice of someone who had not slept and was calling from a place where she was trying not to be heard. "They've been here. 2 men. They were very polite." "I know," Serena said. "Mom, I told them I didn't know what they were talking about," her mother said. "I told them your father never mentioned any storage facility to me, and I had no idea what key they were asking about." A short, taut pause. "I want you to know that I am fully aware that I just lied to what sounded like very dangerous men." Serena closed her eyes, opened them. "Yes," she said, "you did." "I also want you to know," her mother said, "that I am 73 days into my cardiac medication protocol, that I have survived a federal seizure of my home, and that I did not raise you to sign yourself into a marriage contract for my sake, and then have me undo it by talking to strangers." Her voice was very controlled. "Are you safe?" "Yes," Serena said. Is he— A pause. Is Dante Sorrento the kind of man I should be worried about? Serena looked at the helm, at the man standing there with one hand on the throttle, and the scar along his jaw catching the light of the city coming toward them. Not in the way you mean, she said. All right, her mother said. Do what you need to do, and come home when it's over. The call ended. Serena stood with the phone in her hand and did not cry. She was not going to cry on a boat in the middle of a river at 5 a.m, with warrants being processed and a meeting with 2 crime family heads 40 minutes away. But she pressed her free hand flat against the gunwale and felt the cold metal under her palm and allowed herself 4 seconds of something that didn't have a clean name. Then she looked up. The meeting location was a hotel in the city's financial district that Cord had cleared and prepped. A private conference room on the 4th floor accessible through a service entrance, with a security rotation already in place. They came off the boat at the South River dock and transferred to a vehicle Cord had waiting, and Serena changed the bandage on her forearm in the back seat using a first aid kit from the glove compartment, and Dante sat beside her and watched the city pass and said nothing, which was exactly what she needed. The hotel conference room held 5 people when they arrived. Cord, 2 men she didn't know who were clearly security, and the representatives of the Torrance and Vega organizations, not the family heads themselves, she noted, but their designated proxies, which was appropriate given the hour and the circumstances and the level of distrust that applied to everyone in the current situation, including each other. The Torrance proxy was a woman in her late 40s named Carla Mace, who had the precise, compact attention of someone who had been evaluating risk for a living long enough that it had become her resting expression. The Vega proxy was a man named Soto, broad and quiet, who had read both documentation packages twice in the car on the way over, and had a printed copy of the original correspondence photographs folded in his jacket pocket. Soto put the photographs on the table before anyone spoke. These are real, he said. Yes, Serena said. I've been in this business long enough to know fabricated documents from physical originals, he said. These are physical originals, the paper degradation alone. He shook his head once, a slow, controlled movement. Lucien Graves has been moving money through shell infrastructure connected to 3 separate conflicts our families were involved in over the last 4 years. He engineered all 3. Yes, Serena said. Carla Mace was looking at Dante. You didn't know. I had suspicion, Dante said. Not evidence. And now you have evidence. His wife has evidence, Dante said, and the way he said wife was different than it had been before, not the structural term of a contractual arrangement, but something with slightly different weight. Serena noted it and said nothing. What do you want from us? Carla said. Coordination, Dante said. If Torrance and Vega move simultaneously, the other 5 families don't have the option of waiting. Lucien's coalition collapses before it consolidates. And the murder charges against you, Carla said. Fabricated, Dante said, which your own people will confirm if they examine the timeline. Our own people don't do the examining fast enough to beat a federal detainer, Carla said. Then help me stay out of that detainer long enough for the timeline examination to happen, Dante said. Carla looked at Soto. Something passed between them that was not a conversation anyone else in the room was part of. The specific shorthand of people who have worked alongside each other long enough to compress a complex exchange into 4 seconds of eye contact. Soto nodded once. Carla looked back at Dante. We'll move, but we need something from you. Name it, Dante said. Lucien has a man in federal law enforcement, Carla said. A contact he's been using to accelerate the warrant process and suppress information that would complicate his position. We want that man's name. Dante was quiet. You know it, Carla said. It was not a question. If I give you that name, Dante said, you'll use it for your own purposes as well as this one. Correct, Carla said. That gives your organization significant leverage over a federal official that I have no visibility into. Also correct. The conference room was very still. Outside, through the window that looked over the financial district, the sky had gone from gray to the specific pale that preceded dawn, and the buildings were starting to resolve out of their night shapes into their daytime ones. Serena watched Dante make the calculation. She could almost see it, the architecture of it, what was being traded and what was being risked and what the alternative was if he declined. She had spent enough time in this room, metaphorically and literally, to understand the shape of the decision even if she couldn't know all its components. He gave them the name. Carla wrote it on her phone without expression. Soto was already on his own phone, stepping toward the far corner of the room. "We'll need 90 minutes to coordinate," Carla said. "Hold your position until we contact you." She left. Soto was still on his phone, moving into the hallway. Cord looked at Dante. 90 minutes. "Yes," Dante said. Cord went to work the phones. The security rotation adjusted. The room went quiet in the specific way of a space that has just been the site of something significant and is now processing it. Serena walked to the window. The city below was coming to life in the particular way of cities in the hour before full morning. Garbage trucks, delivery vehicles, the first thin stream of people who started before everyone else. She watched it and thought about 90 minutes, and what Lucian Graves was doing in those same 90 minutes, and whether 2 family proxies in a hotel conference room were enough of a counterweight. Dante came to stand beside her, not touching, just there, the way he was there, present, contained, the specific quality of someone who had decided to be somewhere and was fully in it. "It depends on what the other 5 do," she said. "Yes. We don't control that." "No. So we wait." "We wait," he said. She looked at the pale sky and felt the fatigue in her body, the way you feel the sea under a boat, present everywhere, directional, the thing everything else was moving on top of. Her arm hurt. Her knees hurt. The cut on her forearm was going to need actual attention when she had time for actual attention. At 6:47 a.m., while Serena was on her second cup of bad conference room coffee and Dante was on the phone with his attorney for the 3rd time in an hour, Cord's phone went off, and he looked at the screen and said, sharply, "Dante." Dante was already looking. "Lucien is moving," Cord said. "Not through the families, direct. He's filed for emergency injunctive relief through the federal contact." "The contact we just gave Torrance," Dante said. "Torrance hasn't moved yet," Cord said. 90 minutes, they said. We're at 62. "What's the injunction?" Serena said. "Seeking to freeze all assets and communications associated with Vail Shipping International," Cord said, "including the secure messaging backbone you used to transmit the document packages." She understood it immediately. "He's going to use the federal injunction to retroactively invalidate the transmission, claim the network was under federal hold when I used it, making everything sent through it fruit of an illegal access." "Yes," Cord said. "Is he right?" Dante said. She thought about it for 4 seconds. The hold was on the corporate assets, not the communication infrastructure itself. The infrastructure was transferred to a separate personal trust, same as the warehouse. She stopped. Same transfer, same trust. My father put both in the same trust 15 years ago. Which means the communication backbone is legally separate from the corporate seizure, Dante said. Yes, but Lucien doesn't know about the trust document. Or he didn't when he filed the injunction. She turned to Cord. "I need the trust documentation. It'll be in the warehouse, in the same cabinet system. Legal files, Section F, my father's organizational system." "We can't go back to the warehouse," Cord said. "I don't need to go back," she said. "I need someone to go back, someone who isn't us." She looked at Cord. "Do we have anyone who can reach that location clean? Someone Lucian's people won't be watching?" Cord and Dante looked at each other. 40 minutes, Cord said. "Maybe." "The injunction hearing is in 35, Dante said. "Then we need someone faster," Serena said, and she was already dialing her phone. Her brother answered on the second ring because Marcus Vail was 19 and anxious and had not slept, which meant he had been awake waiting for someone to call him and tell him what was happening. "I need you to do something," she said. "Right now. I'm going to give you an address and a cabinet description, and you're going to go get a file folder and photograph everything in it and send it to me in the next 25 minutes. She kept her voice very flat and very clear, the way she had learned to do when she needed someone to function under pressure. "Can you do that?" A pause. "Yes," he said.
Yes. Tell me. She told him. She stood at the window waiting for 23 minutes and 40 seconds, which was not the longest 23 minutes and 40 seconds of her life, but was not far from it. Dante was on calls. Cord was on calls. The security rotation outside moved with the muffled sounds of a machine doing its job. The sky outside finished its transition to full morning. Her phone buzzed. 38 photographs, tight and clear, from her brother's phone. She opened them. Trust documentation, transfer deed, legal registration, all bearing a date that predated the corporate seizure order by 15 years. She packaged them and sent them to Dante's attorney in under 4 minutes with a cover note that was 1 sentence long. At 7:21 a.m., the emergency injunction was denied. At 7:44 a.m., Cord said, "Torrance and Vega are moving." At 7:51 a.m., the first of the remaining 5 family heads responded to the document package. By 8:15, 3 more had responded. By 8:30, Lucien Graves's coalition had 3 members where it had previously had 7, and 2 of those 3 were already fielding calls from their own lieutenants, asking questions they didn't have answers to. And the federal contact who had filed the injunction had gone abruptly silent in a way that suggested Torrance had made the call Dante had enabled them to make. Cord reported all of this in the clipped operational shorthand that was his native language. Serena listened and tracked and did not celebrate because they were not done. "Where is Lucien?" she said. Cord looked at his phone. "Last confirmed location, 40 minutes ago. The Port District." "The harbor," she said. "Yes." She looked at Dante, and something moved between them that was not a conversation but carried the weight of one. A specific understanding arrived at simultaneously, the way understanding sometimes worked when 2 people had been in enough situations together to develop a shared language for it. "He's going to the network," she said. "Not the shipping routes. The physical hub. The original infrastructure node." "Why?" Cord said. "Because it's the only thing he has left," she said. "If he can physically destroy the hub, he destroys the last live evidence of the communication backbone we used. The originals exist, but without the infrastructure record to corroborate them." She looked at Dante. "He's not running. He's burning the evidence." "We need to be there before he finishes," Dante said. "Yes," she said. Cord was already on his phone. The convoy moved through morning traffic at the pace of men who knew how to move through cities without looking like they were moving, and Serena sat in the rear vehicle with Dante beside her and her forearm pressed against her thigh, and the specific quality of alertness that comes from running on no sleep and high stakes for 8 consecutive hours. She was past the point where tired was a feeling. It had become the medium she was operating in, like cold water you'd been submerged in long enough that you stopped noticing the temperature. She noticed Dante's hand on the seat between them, not moving, not reaching for her, just there, palm down, 5 inches from her own hand. She looked at it. She thought about nothing for a moment, then she put her hand on top of his once, briefly, and took it back. He said nothing. Neither did she. That was all. The harbor district came into view through the windshield, and beyond it, the water, and beyond the water, the structure of the primary communications hub that her father had built into the loading infrastructure 30 years ago when the company was new and he had believed that the things you built lasted. And she could see from 3 blocks away that someone had already beaten them there, because there was smoke beginning to rise from the eastern corner of the complex. Dante said, "Faster," and the driver accelerated, and Serena watched the smoke and thought, "He's already inside." The vehicles stopped at the outer perimeter of the harbor complex, and the doors came open, and there were 7 of Dante's people deploying with the specific efficiency of men who had trained for exactly this. And Cord was coordinating on radio, and the harbor was louder up close. Water and machinery and a wind off the bay that smelled of salt and something burning. Dante looked at her. "Stay with the vehicle." "No," she said. "Serena." "He has the network hub," she said. "I know that infrastructure. I know every access point and relay panel and junction in that building because my father walked me through it when I was 17 because he wanted me to understand what he had built." She held his gaze. "You need me in there." His jaw, the scar, the expression underneath the controlled surface. "You don't have a weapon." "I don't need one," she said. I need 30 seconds at the main relay panel, and I can lock the system into a protected state that will preserve every record it holds, even if the physical infrastructure burns. She didn't break eye contact. You need me in there. 3 seconds. He looked at her the way he looked at balance sheets, finding the number that answered the question. Stay with me, he said. 3 steps behind, right side. 2 steps, she said. Something that was almost the smile, almost arriving. 2 steps, he said, and moved toward the building.
She followed him into the smoke, and the harbor noise swallowed them both. And somewhere inside that building, Lucien Graves was destroying the last evidence with the particular focus of a man who had spent 9 years learning from Dante Sorrento exactly how to be untouchable. And he was about to discover what happened when the person who knew the building better than he did came through the door. The smoke was thicker inside than it looked from the street. It came from the eastern corridor, not a full fire yet, more the specific acrid output of electronics burning, circuit boards and cable insulation, and the innards of machines that were not meant to combust. Serena moved 2 steps behind Dante's right shoulder and kept her hand on the wall and her eyes on the floor plan she was rebuilding from memory. The layout her father had walked her through 20 years ago, patient and unhurried, naming each section with the quiet pride of a man showing someone the thing he had built with his own decisions. Main relay panel, center of the building, elevated platform, accessible by 2 staircases, one east, one west. The east staircase was where the smoke was coming from. West, she said, close to Dante's ear. He redirected without asking why. That was something she noted, the absence of the reflexive challenge, the instant recalibration. She had earned that in the last 8 hours. She wasn't sure what to do with it yet. Cord's voice came through Dante's earpiece, which she could hear faintly. 4 of Lucien's people confirmed inside, positions unclear, one sighted near the loading bay on the north side. Dante relayed positioning to the team behind them with hand signals she had been picking up the grammar of over the past several weeks and now mostly understood. The west staircase was clear. They went up. The relay platform was a raised concrete structure in the center of the building, about 15 feet above the main floor, accessed through a metal door that had been left open. Through the open door, the smell of burning intensified and sound, something systematic, deliberate, the sound of destruction being applied with focus rather than fury. Dante stopped at the door, looked through the gap. He held up 2 fingers, then pointed left, then right. 2 people on the platform. She leaned past his shoulder and looked. 2 men, both working, one at the primary relay bank with a device she recognized as an industrial degausser, wiping the magnetic storage components row by row with the patient efficiency of someone completing a task rather than panicking. The second was at the junction board, physically severing cable connections with bolt cutters, systematic, section by section. No, Lucienne. She put her mouth close to Dante's ear. The primary relay is the first bank, left side. If I can get to the manual lockdown switch, it's a physical switch, red housing, below the 3rd row of relay cards, I can trigger a hardware write protect on the entire bank. It locks the storage in read-only state. The degausser can't wipe what's hardware locked. How long? He breathed. 30 seconds once I'm at the panel. The man between you and the panel. I know, she said. He looked at her. In the thin light coming through the door gap, his face was very close and she could see the exact quality of what he was calculating. Not whether to protect her, but how to protect her while letting her do what she needed to do. Which was a more complicated equation and one he was working in real time. When I move, he said, you move. Don't stop. She nodded. He went through the door. She was 2 steps behind him, and the next 15 seconds were the most compressed of her life. Dante engaging the man with the degausser before he could complete the turn, the second man dropping the bolt cutters and reaching for something at his belt, a shout from somewhere below on the main floor, answering something Cord was doing that she had no bandwidth to track. She was moving toward the relay bank with the single-pointed focus of a woman who had a very specific thing to accomplish and was not going to be stopped from it. The man with the degausser went down. The second man had what he'd reached for, and it wasn't a weapon. It was a radio, and he was saying something into it fast, and she caught 2 words that made her move faster. He's here. She reached the relay bank, found the third row, found the red housing exactly where her father had put it 20 years ago, unchanged, because the fundamental architecture of the system had never been updated, only added to, and structural decisions made by careful men tended to stay where they were put. She flipped the switch. A sound she felt more than heard, a low, almost subsonic engagement of the hardware protection, cycling through the bank in a wave she could see in the status indicators, green to amber to the locked red of a system that would now require physical disassembly to alter. The degausser was useless. She stood at the panel breathing hard and felt something move through her chest that was not triumph, too tired for triumph, too aware of what was still unresolved. More like the specific quiet feeling of a door closing on exactly the right side. Dante had the second man against the wall with the efficiency of someone who had not been awake all night and had not been running on anxiety and bad coffee, or if he had converted it into something useful. He looked at her across the platform. "Done?" he said. "Done," she said. Then Lucien Graves walked through the east door. He was alone, which was the first thing she clocked. He was not supposed to be alone. A man in his position, in a building that was actively being cleared by a competing force, did not walk in alone. The second thing she clocked was what he was holding, which was not a weapon in the conventional sense, but was absolutely a weapon. A tablet, screen active, showing what appeared to be a live video feed. She recognized the interior of her mother's house. The room went very still. Lucien stopped 8 feet inside the door. He looked at Dante, then at Serena, then at the relay bank with its locked red status indicators, and something moved through his expression that was not quite surprise, more like a recalculation, the look of a man who has just had one variable change in a complex equation and is rapidly solving for the new configuration. "Smart," he said, and he meant the switch, and he meant it without significant emotion. "It's over, Lucien," Dante said. "That particular piece," Lucien said agreeably. "Yes." He looked at the tablet in his hand. "But there are several pieces." "There is no one in that house," Serena said. "My mother was moved 2 hours ago." Lucien looked at her. "I know," he said. "She was moved to a hotel in the financial district, room 412. A pause. "My people are there now." She held very still. Everything in her wanted to reach for her phone. She did not reach for her phone. "You're lying," she said. "I might be," Lucien said. "Or I might have anticipated that you'd move her the moment you realized she'd been contacted. It's what I would have done. It's what Dante would have done." He looked at Dante. "She's learning from you. That's either very good or very bad, depending on how this ends." "This ends the same way regardless of what you have on that tablet," Dante said. His voice was flat and very controlled. "Torrance and Vega have moved. 3 other families have responded to the documentation. The federal contact you used for the injunction is being handled by interests that are not yours. The evidence package is already in the hands of 4 separate verification parties." He took one step forward. "There's no configuration remaining in which you walk out of this building with what you came in for." "That's probably accurate," Lucien said. He didn't move. "I came in for the relay bank, yes, and the relay bank is locked, which is, as I said, smart." He lowered the tablet slightly. "But I didn't come here only for the relay bank." "Then why?" Serena said. He looked at her with an expression she had not seen on his face at the charity dinner or the warehouse event. Not the calibrated trustworthiness, not the pleasant professional manner. Something older and more tired and more honest than any of those. "I came to make sure Dante understood something," he said, "before this finishes. Because I have spent 9 years in this organization, and I am apparently going to spend the next period of my life in a situation I was trying to avoid by doing what I did. And I want him to know one thing accurately." Dante said nothing. "I didn't start this to destroy you," Lucien said. "I started this because for 9 years I watched you make decisions that I believed were wrong, strategically, operationally, in terms of what this organization could become. I watched you hold back from moves that would have secured our position permanently because of scruples that I believed were going to get us both killed eventually." His voice was not angry. It was the voice of a man delivering a long-considered position. "I was building something better." I believe that. You believe that, Dante said. And the people you killed in the process were in the way of something that would have benefited more people than it hurt, Lucian said. That's what everyone says, Dante said. Everyone who burns something down to build something else. The platform was very quiet except for the distant sounds of the harbor and the muffled communications from below. Cord's team, working through the building, getting closer. I know, Lucien said, and the two words had a weight to them that Serena had not expected. Not regret exactly, more like the acknowledgement of someone who has arrived at a truth slightly too late for it to change anything. I know that's what I said. I know you could construct an argument that puts me in the same category as every man who ever made himself the necessary exception. He looked at Dante with something that had 9 years of genuine familiarity in it, which was the most disturbing thing in the room. You'd probably be right. He set the tablet on the nearest surface, flat, face down. Serena's phone buzzed. She looked. A text from Cord. Hotel confirmed clear. Your mother is secure. Was never touched. She let out a breath that had been waiting to leave her body for the last 4 minutes. Lucien looked at her. Your mother is fine, he said. I want you to know that was never real. I wouldn't have touched her. He seemed to consider something. I had limits. That was one of them. You had limits, she said. And the man you put in the river? That was not a limit I held, he said, and he said it without flinching, which was its own kind of honesty, and not the kind that absolved anything. Cord came through the door with 2 men behind him. Lucien turned toward them. He looked at Dante one more time, the look of a man completing something that had been running for 9 years and needed to be closed. I would have built something remarkable, he said. I genuinely believed that. I know, Dante said. That's what made you dangerous. Lucien Graves was taken out of the building at 8:47 in the morning in the particular quiet of a man who has decided that whatever comes next is the thing that comes next, and there is nothing more to manage. Serena watched him go and tried to find something clean in how she felt about it, and found instead a mixture of things that didn't resolve neatly into any single emotion. She understood more about him than she wanted to. She was not going to confuse that understanding with forgiveness for the specific, calculated destruction he had applied to her family and others like them. Those were 2 different things. She was keeping them separate. The harbor building was cleared by 9:15. The fire in the eastern corridor had been contained by the building's suppression system, which her father had over-engineered because he over-engineered everything structural that he built. The relay bank was intact. The documentation it held was intact, hardware protected, permanent. Serena stood on the main floor of the building in the thinning smoke and looked up through the industrial ceiling to where weak morning light was coming through the high windows and putting long rectangles on the concrete. And she thought about her father standing in this building explaining what each component did and why it mattered and what you built it for, speaking with the patience of a man who believed that if you understood the purpose of a thing, you would treat it with appropriate care. She had treated it with appropriate care. Dante appeared beside her. He had a cut above his left eyebrow from something in the platform confrontation that she hadn't seen happen, and he hadn't mentioned it, which was entirely consistent with everything she had learned about him. She found a packet of sterile wipes in the first aid kit she had taken from the vehicle and held it out to him without comment. He took it, applied it to the cut without looking in a mirror, did a competent enough job. The families, she said. Cord has confirmation from 5 of 7, he said. The remaining 2 are silent, but their silence is now a minority position, which means it's a waiting game rather than an active opposition. Lucien's coalition? Dissolved. His key contacts are distancing at a speed that tells you exactly how committed they were to the man versus the position. The federal charges against you? My attorneys filed for dismissal at 8:30 on the grounds of fabricated evidence. The federal contact Torrance addressed this morning is, he paused, no longer a factor. And my family's assets? The federal hold on your father's estate will be formally reviewed as part of the unwinding of the case that was constructed against it, he said. It will take time, but the underlying case has been significantly compromised. The creditors are shell entities connected to a criminal conspiracy. That changes the legal architecture of the debt. She nodded slowly. How long? Weeks, possibly months for some of it. He looked at her. Your brother's account was released this morning. I authorized a transfer to an independent trust that's insulated from any remaining federal review. His tuition is secured. She looked at him. I did that 4 days ago, he said, before the event, before the car. I wanted to make sure that regardless of what happened, that piece was done. She stood with that for a moment. You didn't tell me. I was going to, he said. There wasn't a good moment. There's never a good moment with you, she said. You accumulate things to tell me and then deliver them at 5 in the morning on a boat. That's fair, he said. She almost smiled, didn't quite. Thank you, she said, for Marcus. He inclined his head slightly, the gesture of someone receiving something they felt was a minimum rather than a gift, which was the specific way he acknowledged things that he felt were obligations and not credits. They left the harbor at 9:30 in a vehicle that took them back through the morning city, which was doing its full daytime operation now. Buses, foot traffic, the ordinary populated life of people whose nights had been entirely unlike this one. Serena watched it pass and felt the gap between that world and the one she had been inside for the last 12 hours with a clarity that was strange in its own way. Not distance, not detachment, just awareness of the two registers running simultaneously. She slept for 3 hours in a safe house that had better furniture than the first one, on a narrow couch with her jacket over her like a blanket. And when she woke up, Cord was in the next room on calls and the light through the window had moved to midday, and her phone had 43 messages she was going to read in order of source rather than timestamp. The ones from Marcus first. 4 of them, escalating from terse to alarm to something that settled at the 4th message, into the specific register of a 19-year-old who has been frightened and is trying to sound like he wasn't. She called him. He answered on the first ring. Are you okay? Yes, she said. The warehouse? I know. You did well. A pause. I went back, he said. Afterward. To make sure the place was locked. Another pause. There was a photograph, on the shelf in the legal cabinet, of Dad and a man I didn't recognize. She went still. What did he look like? Younger than Dad. Dark hair. Kind of formal. A beat. There was a date on the back 14 years ago. She closed her eyes, opened them. I know who that is, she said. Should I be concerned? No, she said. Put it somewhere safe. I'll explain it when I see you. She called her mother next. Elaine Vale answered with the particular efficiency of a woman who had spent the night in a hotel room without her own things and was managing her feelings about it through decisive action. I want to go home, her mother said. Soon, Serena said. A few more days. The house is still under federal review? Partially. It's going to change. It's already in process. Her mother was quiet for a moment. The man. Sorrento. She said the name carefully, the way you said something you were deciding how to hold. He did what he said he'd do. Yes, Serena said. Is that why you're... Her mother stopped, reconsidered the sentence, started it differently. Are you all right? Not the situation. You. She thought about that. She thought about 8 hours on a boat and a river and a warehouse and a hotel conference room and a burning harbor building and a platform and a red switch and a red housing that her father had put there 20 years ago without knowing his daughter would ever need it. She thought about a man standing at a relay bank in the smoke saying done, as if they had always known how to speak the same language. I'm getting there, she said. Her mother made a sound that meant she heard more than what had been said, which was always the particular talent of women who had raised daughters through complicated years. All right, she said. Come when you can. The formal dissolution of Lucien Graves's network took 11 days. That was the administrative timeline, the legal proceedings, the evidence submissions, the coordinated withdrawal of the family coalition that Lucien had been assembling, each node unraveling from the center out
as the documentation propagated and the verification came back clean from 4 independent parties. The federal investigation into Vail shipping was formally suspended on day 6, pending review of evidence that the original case construction had been compromised by a third-party criminal actor. The assets began to move back on day 9.
Serena spent most of those 11 days in Dante's mansion, in the East Library, doing the work of unwinding what had been wound. Not the criminal architecture, which was being handled by attorneys and Cord and the operational machinery of an organization recalibrating its course, but the financial architecture, the creditor structures, the subsidiary shells, the paper trail of a conspiracy that had been 3 years in the building and needed to be 3 weeks in the careful dismantling if it was going to be done in a way that didn't leave live wires behind. She did it with a methodical focus that Rosa would have reported back diligently had Rosa still been in the house. Rosa had left on the second day, not dramatically. There was no confrontation, no scene. Serena came down in the morning and Rosa was simply not there. And the position had been filled by a woman named Petra, who was efficient and direct, and whose references Cord had checked with a thoroughness that was thorough by any reasonable standard. Serena appreciated the efficiency. She did not discuss it. There was a version of anger available to her about Rosa, and she acknowledged it existed and then set it aside because she did not have the bandwidth for it and because the anger felt less important than the work. On the 4th day, Dante came into the library while she was working and set a folder on the desk beside her laptop. "What's this?" she said. "The formal federal response to the Vail shipping case suspension," he said. "There's a section near the back, page 17. She found page 17. Read it again. It was a finding summary from the financial forensics team that had been reviewing her father's records as part of the original investigation. The summary had been completed 3 months before the case was filed, and it had been suppressed. That was the word used in the independent review, suppressed, by the federal contact who had been receiving information from Lucian's network. The summary concluded that the financial irregularities in Vail Shipping's debt structure were consistent with external manipulation by third parties, and that there was insufficient evidence of knowing fraud on the part of the company's principal. Her father had been cleared. He had been cleared before he was ever charged. Someone had made sure that clearing never became the story. She put the folder down. She did not cry in the library. She sat with her hands flat on the desk for a long time and breathed the slow 4-count rhythm, and outside the library window the overgrown garden was doing something quiet in the late afternoon light that she had been watching for weeks without really seeing. Dante was still in the room. She was aware of that. "He knew something was wrong," she said finally. "He wrote a letter to an attorney. He was trying to understand what was happening." "I know," Dante said. "I found the letter in the physical records your brother photographed. I had it separately verified." "He died thinking he had failed," she said. Dante didn't answer that because there was no answer that was adequate, and he was not a man who offered inadequate answers as comfort. What he did instead was cross the room to the window and stand there looking at the garden, and after a moment she stood up and stood beside him, not touching, just present, looking at the same overgrown beds and the stone paths running through them, catching the last of the afternoon light. "The garden," she said. "You said it was abandoned." I said it had been abandoned," he said. "Not by me." She looked at him sideways. "Who?" A pause. "There was someone," he said. "A long time ago. Before this. She kept this garden, and when she was gone, I kept it the way she left it because I couldn't decide whether to change it or clear it, and eventually not deciding became the decision." He said it the way he said the things that cost something, flat, exact, without inflection to soften it, just the information delivered without asking for anything in return. She looked at the garden, at the overgrown beds that had been kept exactly, precisely in their overgrown state, which was itself a form of attention. "What happened to her?" she said. "She left," he said. "She made the right decision for herself, which was the only decision available to her, and I understood it, and it cost me a great deal anyway." He looked at the garden. "That was 11 years ago. The garden has been waiting for someone to decide what to do with it ever since." "That's a long time to leave something unresolved," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at the stone paths, at the structure underneath the wildness, the original design still there, the bones of what it had been meant to be. "It wouldn't take much," she said. "No," he said. "It wouldn't." She went outside that evening for the first time since she had moved in. She walked the paths and put her hands in the overgrown edges and pulled at the things that had gone to excess. Not systematically, not with a plan, just beginning. The way you began things when you didn't know yet what they would become, but you knew that beginning was the necessary first move. She worked until the light was gone. On the 7th day, Marcus came for dinner. He arrived with the slightly formal bearing of a 19-year-old who was determined to behave correctly in a situation for which there was no established behavioral template, and Dante met him in the entryway, and they shook hands and looked at each other with the careful mutual assessment of people who mattered to the same person. Marcus sat at the end of the long table in the dining room, where there were now 3 place settings, positioned so they were all within easy conversation distance rather than strung across the full length of the table. And he ate and answered Dante's questions about his engineering program with the increasing directness of someone who had decided partway through the meal that he was not going to keep performing nervousness. At the end of dinner, he reached into his jacket and put the photograph on the table, the one from the warehouse. Her father and Dante, 14 years younger, in front of a building she didn't recognize. "You knew him," Marcus said to Dante, not accusatory, just clear. "Yes," Dante said. "Before all of this." "Yes." Marcus looked at the photograph for a moment. "He never mentioned you," he said. "He was protecting the people around him," Dante said. "From information they didn't need. It was the way he thought." Marcus absorbed that, looked at his sister, looked back at Dante. "He would have been angry about the marriage," he said. "The way you did it. He didn't like arrangements that put people in positions where they didn't have full information." "I know," Dante said. "He would have been right. But he would have also—" Marcus stopped, thought about it carefully. "He would have understood why you felt you owed him something. He understood obligation." He picked up the photograph and looked at it one more time. "He just would have wanted you to find a better way to pay it." "I know that too," Dante said. Marcus put the photograph in his pocket. He stayed for another hour and talked about his thesis project with the increasing animation of someone who had spent weeks not talking about it and found the topic ready to escape. He left at 9:30 and hugged Serena at the door for slightly longer than usual, which was his way of saying things he didn't have the architecture for yet. On the 11th day, the last of the administrative proceedings resolved. The assets were released. The house, her mother's house, her father's house, was cleared of its federal hold and returned to the estate. The debts, traced to shell entities that were now part of a criminal conspiracy investigation, were under legal challenge in a process that Dante's attorneys estimated would conclude in Serena's favor within 8 weeks. Serena sat in the East Library on the evening of the 11th day and looked at the books on the shelves and the notes in the margins and her own notes answering them, and she thought about what she was going to do next. Not immediately. Immediately was already clear. There was still work. There was always work. But the question underneath the work, the shape of what came after, the contract she had signed said legally, permanently, and without reservation. She had known what that meant when she signed it. She had understood it as a cage with particular dimensions. She had not anticipated that the dimensions would keep changing. She went looking for Dante and found him in the room she had come to think of as his study. Not a library, because the library was for books he was actually thinking about. The study was where the rest of it happened, the operational machinery, the decisions that came with running what he was running, which was in the process of becoming something different from what it had been, piece by piece, the criminal infrastructure being converted or dismantled or redirected in ways that honored a promise made to a man who had helped him survive something 14 years ago. He was at the desk. He looked up. She sat in the chair on the other side of the desk, which she had never done before. She had been in this room, but always at the margins, always peripherally. She sat in the chair and she put her hands in her lap and she looked at him directly. "I want to renegotiate the contract," she said. Something happened to his face. Controlled, contained. Renegotiate. "The original terms were based on a specific set of circumstances," she said. "Most of those circumstances have changed." "Yes," he said carefully. "The structural protection your organization provided is partially complete," she said. "The federal case is resolved. The creditors are under challenge. The threat that made the original arrangement necessary has been removed. She held his gaze. Under the original terms, you could make an argument that the purpose of the marriage has been substantially fulfilled. He was very still. That argument exists, he said. I'm not making it, she said. The stillness changed character. I'm not asking to dissolve the contract, she said. I'm asking to replace it with something that doesn't read like a structural arrangement and isn't motivated by a debt you felt you owed my father. She held his gaze. If I stay in this house, I want it to be because I chose to stay, not because I signed something when I was out of options. Dante looked at her for a long time. The scar along his jaw. The eyes that were the color of something just before it caught fire. The specific quality of attention he gave things that mattered, which was different from the attention he gave things that merely required management. And have you, he said, chosen to stay? I've been thinking about it, she said, for about 11 days. That's a very short time to make a permanent decision, he said. I signed the original contract in one night, she said. Something arrived on his face that was not almost a smile. It was an actual one, small and real and entirely unhidden, which she had only seen twice before, and which she found, to her complete lack of surprise, to be the most dangerous thing about him. The notes in the margins of my books, he said. What about them? You left them there starting from your third day in this house, he said, before I knew anything about you except what I had researched. I read your first note, a correction to an argument about economic determinism that was sharper than anything I'd written in those pages myself. And I thought, this is going to be a problem. A problem, she said. For the arrangement, he said. For the careful structural distance I had designed. Yes. She looked at him. You should have thought about that before you put the proposal in an envelope on my doorstep. In retrospect, he said, I absolutely should have. She stood up. He stood up. The desk was between them, and then it wasn't because she walked around it and stopped 2 feet from him, which was the distance she had been maintaining for 11 weeks, and which had always been the right distance and was now the wrong one. She looked at the scar along his jaw. She looked at the eyes. She thought about a man standing in a harbor building in the smoke saying 2 steps and meaning it, and about a photograph of her father standing next to someone she hadn't yet known, and about notes and margins arguing back at each other across the width of pages. The East Garden, she said. What about it? I'm going to fix it, she said. I started last week. I know what it was meant to be. You can see the original structure under everything that grew over it. It's going to take time. Months, probably. I know, he said. I'm telling you, she said, so you understand that I'm not thinking about leaving. He was looking at her with an expression she was done trying to decode and was instead simply receiving, the way you received something real, without categorizing it, without filing it, just taking it in. I'm not thinking about leaving either, he said. She closed the remaining 2 feet and she kissed him, which was nothing like the first time she had imagined it in the abstract weeks ago when she was building walls against the possibility. It was quieter than that, and slower, and more permanent. And when she pulled back, she was still close enough to see exactly what was on his face. He put his hand against the side of her face. One hand, careful, the way you touch something you were finally allowing yourself to touch, after a long time of not allowing it. She felt the calluses on his palm, and the warmth of it, and the specific grounded reality of a person choosing to be exactly where they were. The original contract, he said. Dissolved, she said. Agreed, he said. She laughed, once, a short, real sound that she hadn't heard from herself in longer than she could account for. And he looked at it, looked at the laugh, at her face, at whatever was there, with the full, undivided attention of a man who had spent 11 years standing in front of an abandoned garden, deciding whether to let it change. 3 weeks later, Elaine Vale moved back into her house on a Tuesday morning with the brisk, purposeful efficiency of a woman returning to her own domain after an unwanted absence. Marcus carried boxes. Serena helped with the kitchen. The federal seals on the front door were gone. There were faint adhesive marks in the paint where they had been, which her mother sanded down that same afternoon with the focused application of a woman who preferred direct action to extended symbolic acknowledgement of difficulty. Serena sat in her father's study that evening, in his chair, at his desk, with the surviving documentation of his life's work in organized folders around her. Not the financial records, those were in process, handled, becoming history. The personal ones, the letters, the photographs, the handwritten notes to himself that he had left in drawers and margins, and the backs of envelopes the way all careful people left traces of their thinking. She found a note she hadn't seen before, in a file she had assumed was empty, a half-finished letter, never sent, addressed to no one. I have been trying to understand how a man accounts for himself at the end of the day. Not the public accounting, that's easy, that's just records. I mean the private one. What you chose and what you didn't, who you helped, and whether it was enough. It stopped there. He had not finished the thought, or had finished it elsewhere, or had found the question too open to close on paper. She sat with it for a long time. She thought about a man who had helped someone survive something 14 years ago without knowing exactly who he was helping, because he had decided that was not the relevant information. She thought about a woman who had signed a contract in the dark and spent 11 weeks learning the shape of the thing she had signed herself into and discovering it was not the shape she had been told. She thought about what you chose and what you didn't. She folded the letter and put it in her pocket. She drove back to the mansion in the early evening, through the city that had done its indifferent, ordinary living through all of this, through everything, as cities do, as the world does. And she went in through the east side of the house and through the garden, where the progress of 3 weeks of deliberate work was visible in the cleared paths, and the cut-back edges, and the structure beginning to re-emerge from underneath what had grown over it. It was not finished. It was going to take months. She walked the length of it in the evening light and thought that was fine. Unfinished things that you were working on were different from abandoned things. The difference was intention. The difference was the choice you made every morning to keep going. She went inside. Dante was in the kitchen, which was not where she usually found him, doing something at the counter that appeared to be competent but did not appear to be confident, which was the only time she ever saw him look uncertain about a physical task. She stopped in the doorway. "What are you doing?" she said. "Attempting," he said, "to make coffee that doesn't taste like it was produced in a safe house." "You've been making coffee your whole life," she said. "I've been having coffee made for me my whole life," he said. "That's a different thing." She came into the kitchen and stood beside him and looked at what he was doing, which was competent enough but missing a step, and she showed him the step without making a narrative out of it, and he watched and adjusted and did it correctly. They stood in the kitchen while the coffee made its sounds and the house settled into its evening quiet around them, and she was aware of the specific, ordinary domesticity of standing next to someone in a kitchen waiting for coffee. The complete ordinariness of it after everything that had been unordinary, and how that ordinariness was not nothing, was in fact the thing you built everything else toward, the quiet at the center that made the storm around it worth surviving. She picked up her father's letter from her pocket. She put it on the counter between them. Dante looked at it, read it, was quiet for a moment. "He never finished it," she said. "Some questions are like that," Dante said. "He would have liked an answer, though," she said. He was the kind of man who liked conclusions. Dante picked up the letter. "Read it again, more slowly. Set it down." "I think," he said, "that the answer is that you don't account for yourself at the end of any given day. You account for yourself at the end of all of them, and you can only do that with someone who was there for most of them and can correct your errors in the telling." She looked at him. "That's surprisingly not terrible," she said. "I have my moments," he said. The coffee finished. She poured 2 cups. She handed him one, and he took it, and they stood in the kitchen of a house that was not yet hers in any legal sense and was entirely hers in every other sense, and drank the coffee, which was good, better than the safe house, significantly better than the boat, exactly right for a kitchen at the end of a long, specific, finished thing. Outside, the garden held its shape in the dark. The paths were clear, the structure was there, and it was going to be there in the morning and the morning after, patient and available for the work that remained. She held her cup with both hands and felt the warmth of it move through her palms, and thought about her father teaching her to read numbers at a kitchen table when she was 16, telling her that every number wants to tell you something, that your job is to figure out what question it's answering. She thought she was beginning to know.